Recording to the cloud.
Great.
Recording.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So happy to have you here. I think that we have quite a group today, and we're really excited about that. You're probably seeing me in the Zoom link, in the Zoom meeting interface as Mira. And I'm not Mira, that's my daughter. This is her laptop I'm using today because a series of unfortunate events means mine is getting a new hard drive this morning.
Oh, bummer.
And and on top of that, the University of Utah is instituting some new security measures. So some of the normal systems and things that we use are less available as we're learning this new process. And so things are a little different for me this morning. So I hope you'll bear with me as we move through this slightly different UCCCN meeting. But we're going to do the normal stuff, almost the normal stuff, up until about 9 o'clock. So thank you all for joining via Zoom. Hopefully your experience has gone well. I think we're all getting more used to Zoom these days. So here's our agenda this morning. We will go ahead and do, our usual welcome and housekeeping and announcements. Some of you may have heard, I think we'll forego introductions this morning because we do have a lot of folks on, and we'd like to not take too much time for that. We would like to know who you are though, and so we might try and follow up after the training to understand better who attended today. We do want to go through our usual brainstorming, which means it's an opportunity for you to tell us about any cases that are a little difficult, giving you some problems that you could use some help with, like to identify resources or places that you can connect your families with to help them. Also, if you have a new resource you've come across, we'd love to hear those and make sure that we get them in the medical home portal. We want to hear about any quality improvement wins that you're experiencing or working towards, and also, of course, motivational interviewing opportunities and wins. And then, of course, we're particularly aware of how different things are right now. So let us know how you're holding up during COVID-19. And then our main attraction today, of course, is going to be some motivational interviewing training. And we're really excited about that. And that'll go from 9 until about 11:30. All right, so welcome. And I'll let you know who I am. I'm Mindy Tuller, and I manage the medical home portal, and I facilitate this meeting. And I'll just let you know that we did some motivational interviewing training. Gosh, it was a while ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. Some of you may remember that, most of you probably won't, but it got a lot of enthusiasm. People really enjoyed it, and we could see the applicability right off the bat for care coordination. And so we've had requests and mentions of it ever since, and so we were really delighted to be able to make this happen today, and clearly there's interest, so we're really excited about that. So obviously we're using Zoom instead of our usual GoToMeeting, and we're actually going to take full advantage of Zoom, and there'll be some breakouts, and Dr. Lindahl will explain that when we get to that point. We are recording, and so it will be available later for folks to review if you'd like. We'll likely go close to 11:30, and I just want to make it clear that if you need to, get up and refill your coffee or whatever, use the bathroom, that's entirely fine. So do what you need to. So again, we're having motivational interviewing training today, and if you're interested, there'll be additional opportunities to move forward with that after today's extended session. So we'll gather that input and that information after the training. All right, so some updates to let you know about on the medical home portal. We have updated the Caring for Your Other Children page, which is in our For Families section. We've also updated information on syncope and CBD for neurologic conditions in children. And both of these pages are in our for professionals and physicians section. All right, so this is your time. This is the time when we let you talk, and you can fill us in on what's going on with what's happening in your organization, your practice, what's not happening, what barriers you're experiencing, what ways you might be trying to handle those barriers, any new resources, anything at all like that. And I'll just show you the next slide as well, because it can all be blended in at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and try and look at who is on the line. And yeah, so I think if you want to just unmute, if that's the way you're connected and that works for you, please feel free to speak up.
Hey there, this is Eric Christensen with Utah Department of Health Integrated Services Program. I just wanted to discuss quickly kind of what we've been doing during COVID-19, kind of more of the same. We've been trying to find ways that we can support families in rural Utah and around the state in a no contact, no live face situation. And fortunately, our nurse practitioner and our psychologists have been able to partner with our care coordinators in the rural sites and also with Walt and Tony on the Wasatch Front to find ways to work with families, get families on the phone or on a Google Meet, and to see what needs are and what sort of helps can be addressed. While it does not diagnose autism, and while it doesn't always do other diagnoses, it definitely provides some modicum of support, I think, that families kind of need right now. I think they feel like someone's listening, someone cares, and they understand that we may not be able to do it all, but we can help with something. And so overall, I think our care coordinators at local health departments and Cynthia and Natalie would say that they've had some very good interactions with our families, and they're doing additional follow-up and just trying to make this be a win for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you guys have kind of unexpectedly found, a bright side to all of this. And I wonder if there might be a way to try and incorporate some of that after things go back to normal, or, are a little bit more like normal. Any thoughts on that, Eric?
I think we realize that telehealth has a very real place, and this forces the issue. Anecdotally, theoretically, I think we all knew that it was a really good way to conduct business sometimes. I mean, for example, Natalie was able to meet with a family at 6 o'clock at night. Family didn't have to take time off of work. Family was home. It was just a really nice kind of way to not upend the day of this family. And with Natalie's availability, I mean, Cynthia's done the same thing. It's worked really well. So I think that could be one of our modes moving forward. How can we provide that support, and how can we see families via distance without all the time involved in traveling, either the family or us or both, and really get to the meat of the issue quickly through available technology. One of the problems we know right now, though, is, as Cynthia mentioned, some of these families, they'll still need that autism diagnosis. And as we know, there aren't always services in rural Utah once you get that diagnosis, but it certainly opens you up to the SPD wait list. I mean, some other services for which you might be eligible. And if you don't have that diagnosis, that certainly curtails that just a little bit. And it certainly supports any sort of educational diagnosis that may be provided in the schools. What is concerning right now is that insurance companies and some other organizations are still requiring the gold standard of the ADOS in doing that autism diagnosis. I think with time, they will prove that there are some reliable, replicable methods out there that can be done via telehealth to get an autism diagnosis. But until those are all normed and everybody, comes to consensus that it is a good way and consistent way to get an autism diagnosis, a lot of these families are in limbo. We can't necessarily do an ADOS. It's very tricky to try to do that and make a child with sensory issues wear a face mask. It's very tricky to try to do that. And we still don't have a way to really get an approved diagnosis, if you will, remotely. So I think I really think with time, and I hope I'm being prophetic when I say this, but also cautiously optimistic, that with time I think this will become a standard, because it has to be. We may not go back to doing business the way we did previously, and that could be for a very long time. But until that is established as a standard, we have a lot of families who are kind of in limbo right now. That's why we're trying to see if we can help them with some behavior modification. What can we do to help families cope on a day-to-day basis without possibly having that formal diagnosis?
Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's fabulous. Anybody else? I think there's probably some new people on the line who might find this a little bit, uncomfortable, but we really want to encourage you, if you are able to share without PHI, you'd be surprised at what this group is able to sort of rally and come up with to help you if you've got kind of a tough thing that's going on. We also really like to hear about updates to cases we've heard about before. So if anybody would like to provide an update, now is a great time for that as well.
Mindy, this is Tony with Integrated Services.
Hey, Tony.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to voice a concern that I have. It's not really, it's more of a complaint, I think. I'm working with a mom in St. George. She is Spanish speaking. And this is something that I run into a lot, and I don't know if anybody can do anything about it, but I get really frustrated with the Medicaid process. It's really hard, these families that are Spanish speaking, to understand the process of applying for Medicaid. They often feel very frustrated and just end up giving up. I've been trying to help this mom for a few months now, and it's really frustrating to her because they just keep asking for more and more and more information, more forms to fill out. They won't give her an answer. She gets frustrated and stops for a little bit, and then she decides she wants to try again, and then we have to start the process all over again. It's very frustrating when you don't speak the language. Her son has cerebral palsy. He doesn't speak. He has autism. He also is on a G-tube. She hasn't had Medicaid for years. He hasn't been seen by a doctor, unfortunately. This is a mom that's very caring. She's takes care of her son and does her best to get his medication and his supplies. A lot of doctors are working with her to help her to get it, as cheap as possible. But I mean, they don't make a lot of money, and she's having to pay for all of these supplies on her own because it's so frustrating to her. And I don't know if there's anything we can do, but I just wanted to voice that, Medicaid does not make it easy. And every time you call, you get somebody different, and everybody tells you something different. And even though she has a caseworker, when you call and you ask for the caseworker, they don't transfer you to that caseworker. Just whoever answers is going to help you, and that's what they say. And it's different every time, and everybody's telling you something different, and that you're missing something different, and it's really, really frustrating. So I don't know if I know there's nothing to.
Well,
it's not really a question or anything. I just.
Well, I think we can throw it back to the group and say, does anyone have any thoughts on how to navigate the Medicaid application process and system, given everything Tony has mentioned?
It's a tough one.
Tony, in a previous life, I worked for Department of Workforce Services for about 18 months, which actually is time I'm going to want back at the end of my life, but that's beside the point. The problem you run into is that many years ago, they moved to a system of the Eligibility Service Center where a call comes in and whoever is answering the phone takes that call. Ultimately, a message is usually sent on to the caseworker who is actually assigned that family, but there can be some real lag time. And again, you never have necessarily the continuity of speaking with the same person twice. Thrown to that, when you need a Spanish speaker, and I ended up taking all sorts of Spanish calls for the entire workforce service group, just because I spoke Spanish but knew nothing about those cases. So as that worker who handles that call, you're pulling up the case, you're trying to dig through it quickly, get a rudimentary understanding of what's going on, and then you're basically leaving a message or an alert for the worker who's ultimately assigned that case. So it is not easy to make this stuff happen. Typically, when you're applying though, and you're going through a periodic review, they used to send out what was called a Form 20, and that was your request for additional information. Almost never, when you submit your information to Workforce Services, is it complete enough for what they need. They almost always have to request additional information. It would be very important, if you can, to get copies of any sort of a notice that is sent to the family, so that you can ensure the family is complying with and sending exactly what is requested. And when that stuff goes in, it's all electronic, and so you have people who will scan documents into the system and get those attached to the appropriate case. So I don't know if you're able to get copies of those notices. There used to be a way that you could, through I think PRISM, go in and let the family designate you as a recipient of notices. And I don't know if that's still a possibility, but it might keep you in the loop to let the family understand what needs to happen and have it be just a little more timely than all of a sudden you find the case is closed and family didn't comply with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, thank goodness for texting. Mom will take a picture of the notices that she receives and then text it to me. And then I try to help her gather the information and send it in. It's still, very frustrating because we'll call Medicaid. The whole process takes forever to get through to somebody, and then they tell you, okay, you're just missing this and this and this, and then they end up sending you other things too, and it's just really frustrating for Mom. And she has a lot on her plate and has to deal with that, and then trying to, I don't know, it'll be worth it. I keep telling her it's going to be worth it once you get the Medicaid, and I know it's really frustrating, and I try to encourage her. But I just wanted to voice that frustration. And
Tony, this is Jill Connor from Shriners Hospitals for Children. I have another thought. I don't know if you've reached out to this group yet. Utah Health Policy Project. They advocate for Medicaid enrollment issues. And I just pulled up their website. They also have remote enrollment assistant options. So that may be an organization that you might want to tap into as well.
Okay, thank you. What did you say that was called again?
It's called the Utah Health Policy Project, UHPP. And they've done a good job in working with our patients. And I know in some of the local healthcare facilities in Utah, they've actually set up tables at the entrance, or when patients come in to register for their appointments, to help enroll patients for Medicaid, because it is such a tedious and oftentimes confusing process. So I would definitely reach out to them and see if they can either point you in the right direction or provide some direct assistance for you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
This is Heidi. In my past life as a care manager, have they even thought about getting Social Security disability for him?
Yes, and I think the process has also been very difficult for them, but I believe they felt they had, they were over income for a while, and so mom was having to pay back. So she's kind of nervous to apply for Social Security again.
Yeah, I would have her keep reapplying for Social Security, because sometimes that's an easier way to get Medicaid than the actual Medicaid process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I would literally have her every time to get it denied. There's also a website, I think I've used it, it's called Take Care Utah. And they should be able also to help get that.
Put the Take Care, this is Carol Stippleman. I just put the Take Care Utah link on the chat page.
Thank you, Dr. Stippleman.
You are so
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, everyone. That was great. Yeah, and we'll make sure that the Utah Health Policy Project and Take Care Utah links go out in the meeting summary as well. Well, Tommy, good luck with that. That's incredibly frustrating, and we're grateful that you're an advocate for that family. All right, anybody else? We've just got a couple minutes more. If anyone else has anything they'd like to share, you're very welcome to. All right, and I do want to just remind folks and mention that we have our listserv that is available to you if you have a question or a problem or anything you want to share or ask about with the group in between our meetings. And so granted, some of you are joining us who don't usually and wouldn't be a part of that list, but for our regular members, and by the way, you're very welcome to join the list as well. But for our regular members, if you have difficult cases that you'd like to get feedback on and a little crowdsourcing for in between our meetings, you're very welcome to, you can send me your question. This often is the way we do it, and then I'll put it out to the group. And we always get such a wonderful response. It seems like it never fails to be useful. So I want to remind you that that's a resource for you. And we've got that information in the slides and also in the meeting resource at the meeting summary at the end of the meeting that I sent out. All right. Oops. That's not what I meant to do. All right, well, I think we are pretty close to moving on. Oh, did want to remind you again about the COVID-19 page we have on the medical home portal. So if you go to the portal, you can see it right up here. You can click on that link at the top, and that'll take you to resources that we're trying to keep up to date and also keep focused so there aren't too many of them and that they're relevant for this audience. So if that's helpful to you, please know that that's a source for good vetted information around the pandemic. Oh, and there's the listserv email. So you're very welcome to email directly to it or email me and then I'll send it out. But that's something that everyone can email to. There's no restrictions on being able to send messages as well as receive them there if you're already part of the group. Okay, well, this is the time when I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brad Lundahl. I'm going to just introduce him, and maybe as I'm doing that, he can take over as the presenter and put his own slides up. Let me know if there's anything I need to do.
Hey, sure. If you could stop sharing your screen, that will allow me to share mine. Okay, great. And I'll get back.
All right, and so as I mentioned in the email that I sent out on Monday, Dr. Lundahl is both a PhD in clinical psychology and an LCSW, and he is a tenured professor in the College of Social Work at the University of Utah, as well as the head of a company that is really trying to get motivational interviewing training out there for folks in a variety of ways. And so we feel really, really lucky to have been able to capture some of his time today and potentially a little bit going forward as well. So as you may recall, I put out a request for, what kind of sort of key ideas and skills would be the most helpful for you for this first, this initial training with Dr. Lundahl. And I did get a little bit of feedback, and so we'll be utilizing that. So Dr. Lundahl hopefully has an idea of what it is that you're coming up against or trying to work with as you work with families with children with complex needs. And so we'll see how this works for you, and if there might be additional training that we can offer and help you to gain these skills for your practice.
Hey, thanks, Mindy. So, and Mindy and Chuck, since you've kind of co-hosting this, if you will monitor the, sometimes there's comments. If there are comments and you want to jump in and stop me and ask questions, or if participants have questions or comments, please feel free to jump in and stop me. I probably won't monitor those as I present, if that's okay.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome. There's a large group of us here. It sounds like a great group. The work you do, I'm sure, is important. I think I'll lead with a story. And it's a story of a hero of mine. His name is Dr. Tani. He's a pediatric cardiologist up at Primary Children's. Maybe some of you have interacted with him. The story comes in this way. So when my niece was diagnosed with a precongenital heart defect. And so immediately upon birth, she was whisked into open heart surgery. And my job at the time was to support my brother-in-law, Scott. My sister was recovering. My brother-in-law was listening to the post-op with Dr. Tani. And at the time it was back in a decade or two back too. We were literally in a supply closet, and, the PA system was saying, Dr. Tani, his beeper was going off, and it was just, pretty chaotic. And he was very present and was listening to Scott and kind of overviewing what had happened. And at the end, Scott said, thank you. And Dr. Tani said, this is your little girl. I'll do whatever I can for her. And when I heard that, it just really struck me. And I think there's two parts to that. One is there's the heart or the intention and the commitment to say, I'll do whatever I can for your little girl. And secondly, there's the skill level, or there's the ability to help. So my hope is through this presentation that, we can get, we can help introduce some skills that derive from motivational interviewing that will hopefully help you work with the families that you get to come in contact with, because we work with, people, little girls, little boys, their mothers or fathers, brothers or sisters. So we work with a large network of individuals, and hopefully some of these skills will help. So that's an introduction. Just as far as the presentation goes, I know we've got a bunch of time, and we're not face-to-face. This might feel like death by PowerPoint. So please jump in anytime and ask questions. You can actually just unmute yourself and ask a question. There'll be a few times where I'll see if we want to practice. We can actually break into what they call breakout rooms, and we can get into groups of 2, 3, 4, whatever we want, and practice some of these skills. Part of what I'll be wondering is if that's a good use of our time, and that may depend on your context. So, but we're going to jump in here and go over some of these key ideas. So there's Mindy introduced me, so thank you. You can come back and look at this if you want. I do a few things. One, trying to enhance the ability of individuals to use motivational interviewing. So our agenda, first of all, just kind of overview will be, we're trying to really examine, if you will, the psychological approaches linked to motivation, engagement, and resistance, right? So that's where MI kind of finds its niche. It doesn't do everything, so it's not a silver bullet by any stretch of the imagination, but it does have, I think, some unique ideas around these three arenas. So what we'll do today is we're going to look at the logic of change really quickly, because that's what we ask people to do. We'll look at some key ideas of motivational interviewing. We're going to try to look at how we might promote engagement through clarifying mutual goals, and part of that comes from the feedback that Mindy received. How do we reduce resistance? I should say that that's a loaded term, resistance. It's a very privileged term, meaning if I say, insight is when you agree with me, resistance is when you don't. And that's so it's a pretty problematic term on some level. And at the same time, we see quote unquote resistance. How we might lift, individuals' motivation, and then hopefully promoting follow through. So those will be some of the things that we're going to look at. Just the logic of change for a second. So imagine a family comes into contact with you, right? And my assumption is based on who I think the audience is that we're hoping that these groups, whether they're, the children or their family members or other people involved with their system, are going to take some actions that will link them to positive outcomes, right? So we want people to do some things differently. Possibly go, when I say back to school, it's the cartoon I could find, to maybe go to classes, to go to, parent training classes, to go to educational models on, diabetes management, somehow to get, more training. At times we want people to go to counseling. We want people to stop doing some things, right? It's a broad swath of things. It doesn't just have to be alcohol there. And we want people to kind of follow through with some checklists. So what MI attempts to look at is like, what are some helpful ingredients to action? So if we want, and this list is a small list, right? Like there's a lot of things that we want people to do more of or less of, whether it's, based on the examples this morning, possibly following through with, heavily bureaucratic systems, linking to different resources in the community, and then following through with those links, and following, if you will, treatment recommendations from healthcare providers. So what's going to help someone follow through, right, to take these actions? So MI is really about helping people activate behaviors that will help them realize positive outcomes. So resources matter. And if we think about resources, that's a broad concept, like time is a resource, energy is a resource, community partners, money, support systems, like broadly defined, accessing resources. Commitment matters. My guess is that all of the families with whom we work are going to face barriers or potholes in their road towards whether it's recovery or just improved, health. And it's going to take some commitment to kind of move through that. Motivation and engagement matter. Knowledge certainly matters. Skill and, having a plan and confidence. This is a partial list. Now, if we think about this, if you put 0 in any of these groups, whether it's resources, commitment, motivation and engagement, knowledge, skill, or plan or confidence, it really is going to draw down someone's action. And so we want to try to assess where people are in these different domains and then try to lift the ones that we can touch. Now, there's other things that are unhelpful, right? Some things that are barriers to action. Again, there's the word resistance. Know that I say that with some humility. Distrust, whether it's of the system, whether it's possibly you or based on historical trauma, or, just people having, a lack of confidence in the system. Fear or doubt, that might be their own, like, can I do this? Or it might be fear or doubt about systems. Mental illness certainly will interfere, lack of resources, and addiction, other issues. This is a partial list. The big idea that I'm trying to communicate here is that there is some logic, if you will, to taking action. And if we can dial in and figure out what are the, what promotes action and what forestalls action, that might help us, more successfully engage with our individuals. So if we talk about MI, motivational interviewing, it doesn't promise to do all of these, right? So MI, for example, does not touch resources or someone's skill level per se. What MI can do, though, is help, engage, promote engagement, motivation, commitment, allows a way for exchanging knowledge. So it can't obviously insert knowledge to somebody, but we're going to show how we can set up conversation styles that promote someone's willingness to be open. And then it's also pretty good at helping people develop plans and therefore lift their confidence. And we'll talk about all these in the future. Right now, we're just talking about the logic of change. So MI doesn't touch many of these other, there's some, again, the barriers, if you will. MI does not, these are going to fall away, can't directly touch mental illness, resources, or addiction. What MI can do is try to prevent, again, resistance, distrust, fear, and doubt, and some other, if you will, barriers to change. So if we look at this with math, oh yeah, we got to do math at the crack of 9 something in the morning on Wednesday. So think of actions, going to meetings, completing homework, and that might be from a physician or a counselor, drinking less, not less water, probably less alcohol or something like that, being kind, eating better, whatever we want someone to do different of. Like if we think of that as action, it's a function of someone's vision, their motivation, confidence, access to resources, knowledge. There's others up there, commitment, a plan, space precluded that. And that's all divided by resistance. So this is a functional A equals B over C, where there's an inverse relationship between resistance and action. And so what we're going to do in MI is try to lift some of these areas and lower resistance. So I hope I'll pause. If anyone has any questions, they're welcome to throw those out at this moment. If not, we're going to jump into some skills. By the way, I've taken off the image, so I can't really see what anyone's doing. So I will continue going until someone verbally pokes me and says, hey, Brad, slow down. So here's one scenario that came into us. And so, Mindy forwarded this to me. So many resources offer family trying to get at the heart of what is most important to them at that time so they don't become overwhelmed. And we might, if going back to that formula, if we think of someone being overwhelmed, whether that's fear or doubt, if that's in that denominator position or that, quote unquote resistance, that might, again, forestall or prevent them, moving into some of the resources that they have, even though they're accessible. So let's look at what MI attempts to do and see how MI might help with that scenario. So I'm going to talk about this from the position of storytelling and motivational interviewing. So the story of consulting or counseling, trying to keep this pretty, if you will, generic. So it might work in many points of intervention, whoever might be engaging with a family or a client, whether the parents or the children. So stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. Same with consultations, right? So every consultation has a beginning point, a point where you ring them up on the phone, you have a Zoom meeting, and then at some point you walk away or, the conversation ends. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if we think about motivational interviewing, it kind of frames conversations in this, there's an arc or a flow to our engagement with a client. So there may be some small talk, and we're not going to talk about the skills around small talk. There's a question of how much small talk is helpful. And, I think it's a lot like water. So if I were, okay, I'm going to try something here. Bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing it this way, and I'm going to share a different function here. So I'm writing right now with a pen that's got a fat tip and my screen that moves. But if I were to ask you, is water good or bad? I think you'd probably say, most people say good, but it's a little bit of a trick question because it's really a curvilinear relationship, right? So if this is, unhappy down here and this is, positive, very low amounts of water, that's low, and this is high. So this is, a drought, and that certainly is damaging. But too much water is also damaging, right? Like that's a flood or a tsunami. And so if you think about small talk, I think, hang tight here, screen. I hope that's visible now. If my PowerPoint isn't up, someone let me know. But the same
You're
goes.
good.
Okay, thank you. So with small talk, if we do no small talk, that might feel pretty robotic, right? It might feel like we're not really engaging with the individual. But if that's all we do, then I wonder if we're any different than our neighbor, right? Which is fine. Neighbors are great. But there's some amount of small talk. But then pretty quickly in the professional role, I think we want to get to figuring out we have a goal. And it's the client's goal that we really want to, understand. I like to call that what land. And then we might transition, again, we're talking about stories, beginnings, middles, and ends. So there's the activity of getting to the clarifying the goal, trying to clarify the client's motivation for that goal. And then eventually we're going to work into some problem solving, like how might this person actually be successful in realizing their goal? All the while, and like I was listening to Eric talk earlier today, this idea of assessment, right? So if we're assessing for something like, a spectrum related disorder, autism or something along those lines, like this is also part of what we're doing, whether we're assessing symptoms, what the cultural impacts are, what the patterns are, the history. So this happens, across, all of our interactions. The same with this idea of engagement, promoting engagement and lowering resistance. I don't think those are stopping points, meaning, I think we promote engagement through doing really good work. And if we do good work with individuals, engagement should be there. Mental illness and things like that certainly interfere. And lowering resistance. So that's, those are activities that happen continually. And then at some point we wrap it up. We end, the conversation. And hopefully this wrap up will entail some verbs, right? Well, if we're in this wrap up section, the person can look back and say, oh, I know what I'm working on, why I'm working on that goal, and how I'm actually going to achieve that goal. So if our clients walk out with those three aspects, I think it's been a successful consultation or exchange. Okay, so we're going to look at this. We're going to start with the beginning, this idea of getting back to that initial scenario. What are the client's goals? And so there's a variety of skills and MI advances for promoting goals, and we'll look at some of those right now. So, let's just sit back for a second. Why clients' priorities should be our priorities. So this is the why to the skill. So research, if we look at research, at least this is from psychology, so I'm not sure that it bounces exactly over into your realm, but there's three things that really promote or that are indicative of a successful counseling approach. It's called the therapeutic alliance, and they talk about three things. Agreed upon goals, and that seems really simple, but it's not always so simple, so we'll talk about some skills to get there. So agreed upon goals, agreed upon methods. So if we go back to that arc of counseling, that's the what land and the how land. And then, a warm working relationship, that we have some sort of connection with our clients. Those are the three. Motivational interviewing adds, if you will, motivation. So that's one reason why our clients' priorities should be our priorities, like we should really champion those. The other thing is that, I don't know what you all think about this. It seems, again, patently obvious, but clients go home, so their goals are most important to them. We really need to champion what they are most interested in. If not, we might evoke some of that, resistance. And so what we don't want to get into is the tug of war situation where if I pull one unit, if you will, north, that pushes someone else, to pull one unit south. So, Newton talked about, equal and opposite reactions. And so we have to be a little bit sensitive about how we, if you will, try to direct, our clients or our patients, or the members with whomever we work. The other thing is like, I'm not sure that, again, kind of the context, but if there's not a focus, if we don't have agreed upon goals, I'm afraid it's a waste of time. In my world, as a mental health practitioner, I'm thinking of one woman who has come to our clinic. It took her by the way, I also own a small clinic. So not only do I try to do teaching and researching on motivational interviewing, I'm deeply involved in practice. So I own a small clinic that has about 12 employees, and so we see a lot of clients every day. And so this one woman with whom I was working, I think she took 2 bus transfers to get to our office, and had to find babysitting. This is a woman who's on low income and just really struggling. And I remember her words of saying, "Brad, can you help me? I don't have much time to waste. Like, it took me a long time to get here. It cost me a lot to be in front of you. Can you help me with my child? Because I'm really struggling." And, that scenario, I don't know if it haunts me, but it certainly evokes, the importance of justice, if you will, the justice of showing up for all of our clients and giving them the best possible care possible, because it really did cost this, I'll call her Shauna. Her name is, in fact, Shauna, but you won't know her. It cost her a lot. For me, it's relatively easy to get to my office, but for her to find babysitting, the amount of, like, the percentage of her income that it took to, get the buses to arrive at my office is quite massive, right? Compared to, at least in my situation, it's pretty easy to just get in my car and drive down there. So I think if we don't have a focus, I'm really concerned that we're not doing justice to our clients. I'll get off my little soapbox. Thank you for allowing me to get on that for a minute. Okay. Are there exceptions to when our clients' priorities should be our priorities? Certainly, child abuse being, a key one, or, the safety of others. So there are times when we certainly have to, if you will, violate, confidentiality because of safety, but I'm not talking about those issues at this point. Okay, so how do we do it? So I'm going to just bring up a few ideas. One is the mindset. So MI talks about the spirit of motivational interviewing, and some of it's a little bit hard to teach, right? Like when I was doing my MI training, one of the trainers was from Germany, and he kind of joked. He says, "You Americans like to talk about the spirit of things. We like to talk more about the technical aspects," and it was just kind of a fun conversation. But so one is a mindset that clients are 100% capable, and when I say permitted, that's actually the only, like, they are in charge of themselves, right? Like, they are going to go home and do their thing. And so we really want to have a mindset that the person in front of me is capable and they will decide what's best for them. Practicing humility, just practice this idea that, I know if you think about the idea of, our respect for different cultures, back in the day, it was cultural tolerance, and doesn't seem like much of a standard. And then eventually we got to this idea of cultural competency. But then we realized it's really cultural humility. Like, we probably do not know. Like, it may be impossible to be completely competent in anyone's culture. And so, a lot of humility. And then, like, that bottom one is that, it's their life. Okay, other mindsets, get in the habit of just asking, right, and checking in. Now, this can frighten us at times, or at least I think I've seen this. But sometimes if we ask people, they might say, "Hey, we're not on target. I'm not being helpful." And that might, induce some fear in us. And so we may not want to ask. And yet MI is all about asking people what their what their thoughts are. And then there's some small skills like permission questions and transition statements. These are very simple skills on some level. So permission question, just asking, hey, is it okay if we explore if we're on track? Can I share a few ideas with you? Could we, identify what are your top priorities? So it's really a simple skill, but very effective. I've done a lot of work with the Division of Child and Family Services here in other states. And sometimes I'll go back and I show them all these kind of fancy skills that MI advances. And then if I come back to them and say, hey, what's most helpful? They always say it's the permission question. Like, maybe we got to just end it right here and just say, do more permission questions. So that seems to be a very helpful, skill. We're not going to actually practice that today unless you want me to go over some slides. I can do that. Then also transition statements. So a transition statement might be like, hey, we've checked in a bit here, like that small talk. If we go back to that arc of focus, is it okay if we just slow down and talk about what our goals are? Can we do that for a moment? And that might be like a transition sentence. Okay. I'm going to jump into some 4 skills about getting to, if you will, clearly identifying goals, asking about their goals. It's really simple. Flipping concerns and complaints. It's got a little bit of a twist to it that I think is helpful. I use it all the time in my clinical practice. I think it's very productive. That something along the lines of the miracle question, it's a little bit different than the miracle question that comes from solution-focused therapy, and then how to prioritize goals. So that will be my agenda for the moment. I know that this is a lot of sitting and listening, so I trust that if you need a break, you'll take a break. Okay, so asking about priorities and goals. Really simple. We just ask them what their priorities and goals are, listen, do some reflections, and then suggest partnering to realize the goal. I'm going to go through a quick example here and then getting to the flipping to concerns and goals. So the simple ask. So notice that there's lots of points of jumping in here. Like, what are your top goals for our session today? So I use this a fair amount, right? So in couples counseling, the complexity can go up dramatically when you're working with a couple as opposed to an individual. And I might say, like, if they start off imagining that they want me to be the referee or a judge or something, I might say something along the lines of, hey, we're going to, wrap up today at about X o'clock, right? Like, if it's successful, if today we're successful, what will you have more of or less of in our, from our session? And so that might be a simple way of asking about their goals for today's session. Same idea here, but this has a little bit of a longer scope. What are you hoping to accomplish at the end of our work? So this is a little bit like the miracle question, but like, hey, if we wrap up here in, 3 months or 1 year, whatever, what will be different in your life? What do you hope to accomplish? What are some of your priorities? And then, what should we focus on? What would interest you? Something along those lines, really simple. These next skills, I think, are sometimes overlooked. So imagine the client says, I think we should discuss organizing my day and planning food for my kids and keeping to a schedule. So a parent, I'm assuming a parent right now. And then we might say, good for you. Now, this is an important part, an important aspect here. So if the counselor says from an MI perspective, good for you, you're noticing many goals, organizing your day, planning food, and keeping a schedule. Are there other goals? And right now I can say, I wish I would have changed my slide. So if that's A, like that's what the counselor says, and if B, were the counselor to say, great, let's work on these, why would A be better than B? And if anyone has any ideas on that. So again, A is, hey, good for you, you have so many goals, organizing day, planning food, keeping a schedule. Are there other goals? If B is, I say, okay, well, let's work on that. Why do you like A better than B? I'll be quiet.
I like A. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. I like A because it's affirming what they're saying. So it does a couple of things. I feel like one, it shows them more that you're more invested in what they are saying, and also giving them the opportunity to maybe even correct you if you missed something or interpreted something wrong. And so it really makes sure that everybody's on the same page, allowing for, I think, better interpretation from that point.
Love it. Thank you, Katie. I fully agree. Any other ideas there? So let me share, kind of echoing what Katie said. There is this affirming, like, hey, good for you. And notice that we're also beginning to, like, from MI, the power of reflection is pretty key. So these ideas came out of the client's mouth and into their ears, or into their mind. It's the client's verbiage, right? And so I'm not introducing something. And it came out of the client's mouth into their ears. So they're like, oh, that's mine. There's no, if you will, dissonance there because it's their words. And then if I repeat those, that's 2 times with specificity that the client gets to engage with their goals. So we're going to work on, organizing, planning, keeping a schedule. And then are there others? So the option B, when I said, oh, that's great, let's work on those. It's non-specific. The pronoun those refers to many different areas, and we don't really get to the specificity that may be needed to help someone move forward. So the power of reflection is, one is the client knows that they've been heard. Secondly, they engage with that idea a couple of times across, if you will, their neurosynapses, right? Like, oh yeah, that's what I'm here to work on. So exactly what Katie said. When they hear keeping it kind of simple, I know life is more complex than this in the real world, but for PowerPoints, we're going to keep it simple. Not really. Those are the things I need to work on. And then notice, this is, okay, which of these is about prioritizing and reflecting? Which of these, and then dropping in, the specific goals do you think is most important for us to work on now? So that's, reflecting plus prioritizing. So that might go back to that, the scenario that someone advanced for today's lecture. I think that would hopefully kind of help with some of the prioritizing. Client says maybe organizing, and then here's where we might transition. Again, we don't have all the slides right in front of us, but if you remember that arc of counseling, small talk, what land, why land, how land, and then wrapping it up, that transition, we might say, hey, sounds like a plan. Before we talk about how you might better organize, can we explore some reasons why this is important to you? That is what's motivating you to focus on this for the moment. So that's where MI might drop into exploring someone's motivation. Once we've, if you will, checked off the idea of getting to an agreed upon goal. Now here we can also, and I don't talk about this skill, depending on your situation, you might also say, if we want to introduce a new goal, something the client has not mentioned. So I'm thinking of Eric's kind of example. I'm shifting it a bit here, but I might say, oh, in addition to these goals, organizing, scheduling, and planning, we also talk about, this idea of having a face-to-face assessment so that you're, a medical professional can look at your child and try to get to a diagnosis, whether or not there's, a spectrum diagnosis at play here. So can I add something to the agenda? So it's fine to tag on goals. And if I were to do an A and B here, like tagging on a goal, like hearing what the client's priorities are and going to those first, and then suggesting a goal if that's A, versus leading strongly with our goals and then asking them what they want to do. I don't know if there's any empirical evidence that suggests one is actually better than the other. I do believe MI would say that it's probably better to hear what the client wants first and then tag one on. Why would that be the case? The client feels heard, they're participating, they're part of the process. We're not just doing it to them, we're setting the agenda with them. Okay, so that's the simple ask. Listen, reflect, and then suggest partnering. We've introduced a few other little skills in talking about this, meaning the function of reflection is so that clients feel heard, and that they also get to pass with that information multiple times. It's not just one and done, but there's some clarity there. And then suggest partnering, like, this we language. Before we talk about how you might, before we explore. So MI pushes this idea of partnering language, we, us, together, collaborate, join, so that our conversation really is about a partnership, not a, separated us, them kind of activity. That's a lot. Let me say one more thing, and then I'll ask for any comments or questions. So this idea of partnering language, I might say, hey, can we talk about how you might pay your bills, right? Like I may not pay the bills for the client, like I won't because of ethical issues, but like, can we explore how you might pay your bills together? We could review some ideas that might help you move forward. So I'm not, trying to confuse responsibility, but sometimes that partnering language about our process, like when we're together, let's focus on what we can do to help you take those steps. Okay. I'm going to freeze there for a second. See if there's, before we go to the next skill, flipping concerns to goals, any thoughts, comments, questions, reactions at this point? Okay. Up and personal, watching me drink. Sorry about that. Okay. Here's the next one. So we're still on this idea of what land. We've done simple direct questions. Let's talk about flipping concerns to goals. The big idea here is that clients often present with concerns or complaints, right? So again, listening to I like, and I just forgot who said that this morning, but when she's talking about the challenges of, accessing Medicaid, I think she says, I have a concern. She goes, it's actually a complaint. And that's fair, right? Like people come to us with complaints, right? And what we want to do is hear those concerns and complaints, offer some empathy, and then try to flip it to an empowered position. And we'll talk about how to do that with 6 steps. So, and then we'll do a quick practice. So if you're listening in, you might think, oh, in about 5 minutes, we're going to do a practice session where I'm going to get us into small groups. So that's on our menu here. So when I'm working with a client and I hear a concern, there was one time in my career when I probably would have been like, oh no, what do I do? There's a concern or a complaint, and maybe I lack confidence to help them. But now I'm like, oh great, a concern. And I can get kind of happy because I know what to do. The first thing to do is to think, what must it be like to be them? So do some perspective taking to try to get to empathy, because empathy is super helpful, right? So I might think, Medicaid is not, being very responsive. It's really difficult, or maybe they make too much money. I'm like, that kind of stinks. They're in between a rock and a hard place, or this child, with CP really needs the services, as does the family. And it must be overwhelming, right? Like it's difficult enough to be a parent of a child with special needs. Like that's got to be, overwhelming and taxing, and, pulling at the heartstrings as well. There's just a lot going on there. So I want to try to get to some of that empathy. This is all internal. And then I want to think, well, what's the opposite of the concern? So if it's like a sense of despair or futility, like, hey, we're never getting anywhere, that they have a plan. Like there must be a way to get onto Medicaid. I may not know that way. And if I don't know, what's the opposite? Well, it's to know. And how do you get to knowing? It's through research or through coming up with ideas, just like the community did today, where lots of ideas were advanced, right? So the opposite is that the person has a plan for getting onto Medicaid, or they have a separate plan for getting assistance. I know I'm making it sound super simple. I apologize for that, but that's the basic idea. Is like, if this person's like, I can't get onto Medicaid, or it's really difficult, well, then the opposite would be like patience in trying to get onto Medicaid, increasing someone's, plan for getting onto Medicaid, increasing maybe someone's exposure to other individuals who have, or if Medicaid's not an option, what's our plan B or C? Anyway, and then the 6th step is to reflect the concern. So if I were in that situation, I might say, hey, you're having a difficult time getting onto Medicaid, and that's it. That would be the simple reflection. So that's just dropping 1 down into this 4 position. The 5th thing is like genuine empathy as appropriate. Like, and I can imagine that's really difficult. Like, you need these services yesterday, and you've got enough going on to battle with Medicaid can be really challenging and difficult. And then flipping it into a concern is something along these lines. Well, maybe we can work together. So there's that partnering language we just barely talked about, right? Maybe we can work together to help you figure out, the best strategy for accessing Medicaid. How does that sound? If the client says yes in this space right here, then we've accomplished, flipping the concern to a goal, and the client is with us, right? So now I don't expect there to be a tug of war, right? I don't expect them to be fighting me, that we're on an agreed upon goal to kind of move forward. Okay. So let me just look at a few ideas here, and then we're going to practice. So imagine a parent comes in with depression. What's the goal? You want to feel alive, have purpose and energy. See this a lot with, postpartum depression. It's very real, very concerning, and cruel, right? Very, very cruel. Like at the time when someone's hoping to, feel enthused about having a child, they're experiencing depression. My child won't sleep. Discover sleep hygiene ideas for the children. I don't know what to do. You want to be more certain of your direction or to have a clear plan. People might come in with addiction. You want a healthier relationship with whatever it may be. So that's part of it, is just to hear the concern, say what's its opposite. To a few other examples here. My child doesn't listen. You're looking to find strategies to promote compliance. I'm too busy to follow through. You want to find methods to balance, the many demands that you have. Child doesn't like school. Most don't. So yeah, who knows, some do. You want to help your child find purpose in their activities, including school. Someone's overwhelmed. You want to feel in control. So those are some ideas of flipping. Now, how do we add the empathy and partnering? So I'm going to fiddle with this. Excuse me. Okay. So the concern, maybe, a parent's like, I don't know if I should stay home with my kids or go back to work. So someone's in kind of a conundrum there. So there's the empathy plus partnering. So balancing is challenging. That's some empathy. Let's work together to help you find a way to make this decision. Again, please realize that I know there's a lot of context here, and these are simple kind of examples. And so we need to take into account the many aspects of a person's life. But that's what we're trying to accomplish here is, I'll just give quick examples. I don't have housing. Finding housing is stressful, and you already have a lot going on. So there's that part, there's the empathy. Can we discuss the options to secure housing? Something along those lines, where there's empathy plus this idea of partnering to work together to get to the goal. I don't want to go to class. Imagine someone doesn't want to go to a parent training class or a drug and alcohol class, something like that. You don't want to go to class. So that's a basic reflection. Classes can get old. There's some empathy. Can we spend a few minutes finding ways to approach class so you feel engaged or see some purpose in it? So there's the bid to flip the concern to the goal, and with some partnering language. These requirements are useless and meaningless. Based on the conversation today, there may be like, yeah, they are. These requirements feel like too much, and they can be frustrating. So there's some empathy. But then if we just stop there, it's like, well, it stinks to be you, right? Like, yeah, that's too bad. Like, game over. Like, hopefully not game over. Let's flip the concern into a goal and try to work to that. Can we collaborate to make the most of these requirements so that you can get back on track, or something along those lines? Okay, here's a quick example. So a client says, hey, I want to stop drinking. I'm not sure if it's possible. So there's the empathy. This is all in my head, right? So the first steps are just, if you will, internal. They might feel worried, hopeless, anxious, uncertain about whether they can succeed. What's the opposite? The person feels confident, hopeful, they have a plan or promise. There's lots of possibilities there, right? So given this very small, kind of stem, if you will, there's lots of possibilities. So it might, stating the concern, like, hey, you're wanting to quit, but you're not sure if you can. There's some empathy. By the way, steps 4 and 5 can mix. Like, I don't want this to feel, it shouldn't feel regimented. It shouldn't feel cookie cutter or formulaic, right? So live on the edge, mix 4 and 5 up all you want. You're wanting to quit, not sure if you can. This may leave you feeling doubtful and worried. That's understandable, or that's normal. And then maybe together we can explore some methods of slowing down on drinking that might help you feel confident. Would you like to do that together, I should say? And hopefully they'll say yes. And then we've got an agreed upon goal, which is exploring. Okay. Here's another one. Maybe that someone's facing a big decision. Imagine a parent who's, deciding on, there's so many big decisions, whether it's, genetic testing, possibly moving to get their child better care. I'm sure you've engaged with people that face big decisions. So hearing it, there's a big decision, what's the emotion to that? There's some examples in position 2 there: worried, anxious, pressured. The opposite is they have some confidence, clear sense of direction. So 4 is big decisions can be tough. There's some empathy, especially when you're unsure what to do. Feel anxious, pressured, the decision's coming at you. Together, can we identify some methods of approaching big decisions so you feel better about your choice? Okay, so practice. Let me slow down, and I'm going to, I can come back to share the screen if you want to look at it. So the simple ask: listen, reflect, suggest partnering. Flipping it was reflecting the concern, flip it to a goal, and suggest partnering language. Nope. I need some empathy in there. Suggest partnering, there needs to be empathy, so I need to change that slide. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and just any reactions, thoughts, ideas about some of these skills. Session. That is, I know in this.
I'll speak up. And this is not Mira, this is Mindy. The one thing I was noticing in your slides and just overall is that there's just a real emphasis on making sure that you understand what they're feeling. So a goal might be, I want to drink less, or I want to feel more in control, and I want to follow a schedule. So, the following a schedule is the thing, but the feeling that would accompany that, having met that goal, is really what the client is after. I think that's what we're all after, right? Is to feel in control. If the following the schedule is the way to get to that, or the reducing drinking is the way to get to that, that's fine. But ultimately, it's understanding what they are feeling now and how they want to feel. Does that sound right?
Love it, Mindy. Yeah, spot on. Thank you for clarifying. There's that adage, like, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care, right? So empathy is huge, or understanding where someone's coming from. I don't know that's enough. Like, if all we do is empathy, I think we need empathy plus empowerment, and I've got a little section that will talk about that as well. Yeah, but without empathy, I think it can really forestall someone's forward progress. An example that I like to do if we were together, I guess I can point down at my desk here. So if I were to say, hey, you stick $1 in the water machine or the kale machine, and you push a button to get that to come out, and it doesn't come out, what do you do? So if you were all like, imagine you stick, again, $1 in the pop machine or whatever, and you push that button to get it to come out. When it doesn't come out, you probably do this. Intensity and frequency increase. And I think empathy is the way to, if you will, like, oh, Mindy understands me. Now I can go forward. Without that empathy or that kind of deeper understanding, I think people aren't as comfortable moving forward. So thank you. Great comment. And I'm talking too much. Any other reactions from any other of our participants?
Sorry, it took me a second to find the the unmute button on here. This is Eric Christensen. I talked about the autism piece. I know just through the years, a lot of times people are just really yes men. Like, it's an uncomfortable situation. They might just want to get out of there. Life is crazy, and so they just tell you yes or anything. I think so important is that follow up as well. But one of the other pieces, though, is follow up can be really tricky because you cannot hold their hand every second of the way. And so I think coming up with ways that you can be supportive within your work norms and your caseload and all of the rest of it is a really big consideration. I'm going to just say this, and I think I speak for the entire group, that we have families who need just a little bit of help to try to get online, get organized, deal with whatever diagnosis or issue or life event. And then we have other families that are a train wreck 24/7. And some of those families need a lot more tender, loving care. But I think being able to set boundaries on what you can do is really important as well. To be able to say, okay, I'm going to follow up with you and support you. And I'm not saying you say this to the family, but you say this to yourself. I will support and follow up, but I cannot be there every second of every day.
Yeah, I like that, Eric. And with boundaries, there's another little, and I can pull it up if you'd like, but a skill like just taking the goals, like hearing what they say, like you want to, for example, imagine someone says, well, can you move me up to the front of the line? Like maybe there's a waiting list to get onto housing or something, right? You know, can you move me up? And so how would I approach that? I might say like, I hear you, you'd like to be moved up. And then empathy, of course you would. You want secure housing, and that makes sense. And then the boundaries. So if step one is hearing them and reflecting that, two is the empathy, like, yeah, that makes sense that you want that. Like makes, of course you do. And then the third is like, and we can't do that because of whatever reasons, like, setting the boundary. And then I think the fourth step is like, and what I can do is talk about other things you can do. So like setting that boundary and then pointing it, like, we can't get you on, the housing list as soon as possible. And I can try to connect you to other agencies or other resources. Would you like that? So they, in addition to the boundary, they have, another option for them. Sometimes that option isn't, what's the word? Like the option might be not materially helpful, but maybe, how do you get to, either psychological, emotional access to, I don't know, something helpful. It may not be materially helpful, but great comment. Other reactions from members of the team or the participant list here. Okay, let me ask this. I think, what's your sense on practicing? Like, should we try a breakout room and practice the skill? If so, I'll tell you what, I'm going to try it once and see how it goes. And if we like it, we'll continue. If not, we'll just do death by PowerPoint throughout. So I'm going to break us into breakout rooms. I'd like you, we're going to do groups of two. So 2 people. You'll be asked, when I flip the button, you'll be asked to accept an invitation to go into a breakout room. And then should be 2 of you. If someone's off saving the world, instead of listening to the PowerPoint, it might just be an empty screen. But what I'd like for you to do is this idea of flipping concerns into complaints. I would like for there to be one person will be the client type, and decide that maybe the first one on becomes the client. And then the second person, just go through those 6 steps of the client's going to offer up some concern. And this is not the time to throw out the most hairy of situations, like the client from hell. Let's not be that one, right? Like we're just practicing here. We're just doing, practicing skill development. So say something pretty straightforward. And then if you're the clinician type, my invitation is for you to hear the concern, try to think to yourself, well, how can I get to empathy for that person? And then flip it with partnering language in your head. And then step 4 would be reflect the concern, like, hey, you're struggling right now with a child who's not listening to anything. And that can be really overwhelming and upsetting. And at times you can lose your patience. And then the flip is together, maybe we can figure out what's, driving some of your child's misbehavior, if you will, and find ways to help with that. Would that be okay? And so that's running through the steps. Okay, so I'm gonna try this breakout room function here. I'm gonna go to, there's 48 participants right now. Maybe some people are leaving because they're worried about that. So we're gonna go to 24 rooms. So I'm gonna do this real quick. And then this is gonna be a pretty small, short, I should say. So we're gonna take about just a few minutes to move forward here. So ready, steady, go. We're gonna do like 3 minutes, probably I'm gonna do 4 minutes of practicing, and then I'll bring us back. So 1, 2, 3, see ya. So if you're still listening, I think you have to, yeah, there you go. Join a room. Still a few. If someone is there and they didn't have a partner, I'm happy to practice with you. It's kind of hard to know. Hey, Elsa. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Brad. This is an awesome training. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right. I think we're getting back. So how did it go? How are the breakout rooms? Did that work for people? It's kind of a neat little function of Zoom, actually. I think it's surprisingly functional. It gets pretty close to what real classrooms can do. Okay, any reactions, feedbacks to the effort of doing practice?
Yeah, I'll comment. So it was super short, of course. And when you listed, your presentation is so nicely organized and the steps are so clear. And then when you're in it, you kind of forget half of the steps. And one thing that I thought was cool to recognize in my little team of two is that the other person forgot to do the initial empathy and reflecting back kind of steps. And that's what I'm stronger at, but she was really good at more of the coming up with action-oriented steps, you know, that would help me in my situation because I was the client. But I thought it was cool that, you know, some of us have strengths in one area and others in the other area. And so what we remember from your list is mostly, I think, what we're already strong in. And so I just wanted to comment on that. But it was really helpful to practice it.
Thank you. Fair point. So these things do look deceptively simple. And then, complexity hits and you're like, gee, what happens? Although, I think it's interesting, like my understanding of like pilots who fly airplanes, that's a pretty important job. Like they've really reduced it, like, they hit a goose or whatever on takeoff. And it's like, there's a picture of hit a goose, do these steps. It's very clearly delineated. And so anyway, I think it's a good point. And how do we get to, kind of simple methods to kind of move forward? I like to think sometimes like being ambidextrous. So I'm, right-handed. So my left hand, so maybe I'm really good at empathy and I'm not so good at that empowering or flipping it to an empowering position to say, oh, I've got the right hand thing down. Like that comes easy to me. Introducing that other side might take a little bit of skill and I might have to kind of, intentionally practice like, okay, strengthen my left hand by doing a little bit more of this so that, they both fuse or blend. Yeah, good point. Other reactions about the practice? Okay. So it's an effort. Practice makes, anyone? Practice makes permanent. That's also a trick question. If you go watch my tennis serve, you'll be like, that guy, double faults all the time. And I practice a bad serve all the time. It's not, so practice makes permanent, not perfect. And so the idea is like, if we want to improve, part of learning and, this idea of, Malcolm Gladwell popularized from implementation science, this idea of Erickson is the guy who really did it, but this idea of how do you become really good at something? It's the idea is like you have very specific skills and then you practice toward those. And then, it's about feedback. So learning 101 is about saying, okay, I'm going to try to accomplish this. I'm going to try it out. And then I'm going to get feedback. And over time, we can develop or hone those skills. So there are a couple. We looked at, just getting to agreed upon goals through flipping concerns into goals and the simple ask. Okay, I'm going to jump back to any other comments before I jump back to the presentation? Okay.
I had a question about how, like, you state, the flipping concern, the reflecting, and the partnering piece. What if you're continually being met with a no instead of a yes? At some point, do you just say, it looks like I can't help you? Or what do you, I don't know.
Yeah, some people come looking for fights, right? Athena said they may, if you're on a witch hunt, you tend to find witches and then we burn them, right? So it's, it is possible that part of this is the client's mental illness. I say that with deep respect. But what I would try to do is just kind of what you said is like, if I'm talking to you, Athena, I might say like, hey, Athena, I noticed that a lot of times we come up with ideas and that you routinely say no. Help me understand what's missing. So if you go back to that original formula, that's resistance on the bottom there, like there must be something that's missing. Can we explore that? Or maybe I'm on the wrong goal, and so I'm chasing a goal that they're not identifying with, or they have a different priority, right? So I would want to clarify first, are we chasing the right rabbit? Do we have the right goal? If not, reconvene. And then, like mentioned earlier, let me like, okay, so Athena, you have goals 1, 2, and 3. My agency has goals 4 and 5. Let's figure out how we can work together. And then kind of like Eric, there's times when you have to say no to people and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Here's what I can help you with. So that's how I would approach it, is try not to personalize it. Try not to say, oh, this is about me, because then I get all sorts of wonky in my brain, right? And just say, okay, if this person's saying no, there may be a reason to that. Can we come to, some sort of agreement through prioritizing and shifting the focus? So that's where I'd start. And then at some point, this is not the punt that I want to go with, meaning, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and you can send all the king's horses and all the king's men and not put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So, and I'm not trying to punt at that moment, but like on some level, you can dispatch all of your resources or everything you have, and it still doesn't always work. But let's make sure we dispatch everything, right? Like let's send everybody, let's do all that we can. And then there is a time when, I don't know, I'm a pathological optimist. I always try. So I don't know if that helps or not, Athena, but I would recognize it, try not to take it personally, and try to say, I'm doing my level best as whatever your role is. And then I hope they pick it up. And if they don't, maybe they're given them some other resources.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thank you for the question. Other ideas or reactions? Okay, so thank you. Let me go back to sharing screen, and I assume that you can now see my PowerPoint. If I'm off, someone tell me. So we practiced that, and we're still in goals here, and I need to jump through this a little bit more quickly so we can move to some other ideas. So the miracle question, by the way, this is being recorded. And so I think everyone knew that. If not, now you know. Someone asked if these PowerPoints will be made available. And so I think there will be a slide, there'll be a video that you can go back and review. So these are some soft skills, we language. I know I've introduced that. It's not that difficult. Just dropping into partnering language, permission questions. We talked about that. Empathy that comes through perspective taking. And sometimes that's it may come pretty easy for folks. Like, if not, like, how do you intentionally, try to understand what's deep for someone, what's symbolic. I like how Mindy talked about, this is really about control, and control is about security. And if you can empathize at that level, that people don't want to get hurt, they want to feel safe, then I think you're in solid position. Reflections and transitions, we talked about those briefly. Okay, so moving forward, miracle question. I think when it's good to use, maybe the goals aren't clearly identified, or, there's a lot of goals, there's a lot going on. And we're going to talk about how to do a transitional. So one is you recognize it, transitional statement, and then we're going to ask a couple of questions, certainly peppering in, empathy, compassion as we do this. So recognize maybe the goal's not clear, and then a transitional statement. So and part of, like, going back to that arc of counseling, part of the idea here is that we really want to lead people along with us, right? Like, so if there's leadership in a case, I'm not trying to ambush someone or do something kind of sneaky. It's really straightforward. So here's a transitional statement. One way to help us, so there's that partnering language, identify goals that might be of most use for you, is to explore the miracle question, or a question that will help you see what you want, most in your life. And then, again, that's kind of clunky. Find your own way of saying that. So basically it's this, like, hey, I'm going to advance 2 miracle questions. If life were much better, there would be more of what? Like, help me understand if life were just kind of cruising along in a way that was helpful to you or more helpful to you, what would there be? Now, teenagers are going to say, like, hey, I'd be a rock star. So would I. So we want to stay somewhat grounded to reality, but that's okay. Even back to kind of Mindy's idea, like, why do you want to be a rock star? Let's not get into that one. Or if life were much better for you, what would there be less of? So if they get into the idea of miracle, gets a little, metaphysical. And so I actually don't often use the word miracle. I'll just say something along the lines of, hey, if life were much better, what would there be more of or less of? And then just kind of chunk those out, and those become our goals to work on. And then kind of reflecting those, and then trying to identify those as goals for our work together. So that's a simple way to get to agreed upon goals. Here are some examples. There'd be more of what? Peace, friendship, money, sober days, whatever it may be. There'd be less of what? Stress, arguing, depression, problems with alcohol. There's a lot of ideas here. And then, hearing those, reflecting those, and saying, can we work on them together? So the skills begin to blend here. They're not new skills, just a way to get people to talk a bit. Okay. So last one, prioritizing. So we're still in this idea of what land. So how do we, again, pepper in a bunch of these skills here that we've kind of reviewed this already. So if there's a lot of goals, like, rare is the person who's if you will, single, owner, one problem issue. Like, there's there's usually a variety of concerns to work on, right? So what we might do is mentally review, okay, these are all the goals or concerns that the person said. Remind yourself, I put the student here if it's a child, but it could be a parent. Like they get to choose, right? If again, child abuse and things like that, exceptions certainly. Summarize the concerns or goals that's out loud. So 1 and 2 is mentally, summarize the concerns, goals, offer empathy as appropriate. And then just say, like, of these, where do you think it's most important? Like, which do you think is the most important? Now, there are times when I will be thinking I know what's most important. I'm sure I know what's most important. But then I'll ask the client, they'll choose something completely different. And that's where that humility comes in, right? Like, I'm not really sure what their highest priority is. And notice this doesn't preclude us from jumping in. So another one of the case examples that Mindy sent me was, when there's a discord between what if you will, the client's wanting and the healthcare provider, like I don't have to give up everything and say, oh, whatever you want, client, is what we're going to go for. I can certainly say, and okay, client, you want to work on A, B, and C, and our agency really also emphasizes D. So can we talk about how to talk about A, B, and C and D so that we can move forward? So I'm still going to retain, if you will, my professional judgment there. All right. So those two other miracle question, we're not going to practice that. Just what would you want more of or less of? Those become goals, and then prioritizing. So I think we've done that. Here's a quick example. Review the goals, what's been said. Know the client gets to choose. So imagine this: clients want to better manage their drinking, be more peaceful or angry. I guess I work with a lot of people that have anger issues, and get better rest and feel healthy overall. That's quite a bit. Would you like to add something for us to consider? Hopefully this is conversational. Like, this is meant to be a collaboration, not a very stepwise. It's not meant to be robotic. So there's the empathy. You're going through a lot, and getting relief in these areas would be helpful. I think, a way to move forward is to identify which of your goals is the top priority, and then we can take our next steps. Which of these goals do you think we should work on first? And if the client says, I don't know, maybe you have an opinion, and not, it's like, oh, then there's another concern, like they don't know, right? Like that can be not knowing where to begin might be part of the problem. Like either they're lacking confidence in knowing, they have they're challenged in kind of creating a credible plan, something along those lines. Okay, I'm gonna skip forward here because time is running shy. So here's, well, let me not do that. Any thoughts, comments, reactions to this idea of, I tend to do that, I apologize. Any reactions to this idea of the miracle question? Again, I don't use the word miracle because it can trip some people out as far as, again, what's possible, what's not possible. Any reactions to that idea or prioritizing before we move forward?
I'll just mention that I think asking that question, whatever you want to characterize it as, is maybe something that the family or client hasn't ever thought of. They've not thought of it in that way. So I think that's really helpful, and it puts it back on them to try and identify what they really do want to see if they haven't considered that before. So I really like that.
Nice. Okay, can we do a little like wake us up game here? And this might be a little odd, but I'm going to do this anyway. This is my old wallet. I've had it for like 10 years. I will pick out a bill, and I will send this bill to anyone in this group. All right, so someone gets to win some money. Are you ready? $10, not much, but $10, 10 free dollars. So here's an example of this idea of the motivation for really slowing down and asking clients what they want. So I was working with a woman, I'm going to use the example of Shauna again. It's motivation, so it's a little bit away from goals into motivation. And she'd come in massively depressed, she had a hard life, right? Was, doing all sorts of things to get drugs, had 3 kids. So she was prostituting herself. She had, 3 kids that were kind of struggling. This is, anyway, I'm not engaging in PHI violation because there's no way you would know this person. I guess there's a way, but I don't think it is. So tough life. And she'd worked through a lot of things. So her depression went down. She started treating her kids better. It's just this, she was really doing better. She said, Brad, I now want to start to work on my budget. Okay, so here's where the $10 come in. If you can imagine, if you can guess, now if you've had my class before, then this will be a free $10 to you. And you'll have to just somehow I'll have to get this to you. I can Venmo it to you. What her motivation was for working on her budget, then you get free $10. So here's what you could do. If you go to the, the chat function, everyone can drop in like why you think she wanted to work on her budget, and whoever gets it right, and I will write the answer down right here. And I'll give you a little bit of, so it's there, it's written down. I'll show it to you. She had 3 kids. That's a little bit of a hint. So why did she want, okay, people are coming in. She could afford more drugs for her kids. I'll open this up for 30 seconds. Whoever wants to come up, stability, can't afford food, meds, vacation with their kids, afford therapy for kids, takes a lot of money to raise. That was her stressor. Good. Fourth, no. So she could stop processing for money, self-care, didn't want to work for her future. Good. No one's got it yet. School, invest. Usually people come up with tattoos, but that wasn't it either. Savings. All right. I'm going to go count down from 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm saving my $10. So she said the following. She goes, Brad, it's my daughter's birthday next month. And for the last 2 years, I've had to tell my daughter, hey, I don't have enough money to have a birthday party for you. Can we wait till next month? And she goes, and by the way, Brad, that really sucks to look at her kid was young. And that's why I need to save money. If someone said that and I missed it, send me your Venmo account. I'll send you the money. So notice that I thought I might have known it. Like the list that you all produced, same, right? Like those are the things I would have thought. But this is her motivation. So I think part of that idea of humility and just kind of slowing down and saying, what is it really for you? Because that's hers and that's motivating. Okay, thanks for allowing me to be goofy and practice that exercise there. Okay, we're going to share my screen again here, and we're going to jump into this question. So imagine this. This is the second scenario. Parents could use resources, but if follow-up, they're not really following through. And so that's weird, right? Like they say they want the resources, you give them the resources, and they're not doing it. Sounds like me and my approach to dieting and exercise. That's odd. Okay, so how do we think about that from an MI perspective? So if they're not following through, it could be that one is we don't have the right goal. It could be that they're not, we got to look at their motivation system, or it could be that they're not confident. So if I go back to this thing here, we're going to talk about, do we have clearly established goals? Is the client's motivation high enough to work on it, or are they lacking confidence? So let's peek at some of these ideas here. By the way, oh, sorry, let me do one other thing. I'm going to go off in a different direction for a second. So imagine the following. So I'm going to draw again. Where's my pen? So, if we think about a simple situation, so I know people don't fit nicely into 2x2 boxes, but let's imagine this is confidence here, and this is high, and this is low. And then on this axis, we're going to put motivation, high and low. Like what we're hoping for, by the way, can someone see that I'm drawing, by the way? Did that work? Someone say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So what we hope is that our clients have high motivation and high confidence. What do you do with clients like that? You refer them to Compass Counseling and Consulting. Kidding, that's my agency. That was a joke. But what happens here? Like if someone is in high motivation, but they're sitting with low confidence, like if this is the client right now, if this is where they're sitting, That's a pretty dangerous position, I believe, because it's dangerous that they might eventually go, oh, I don't really care. Like, or their motivation might drift down because they think that they can't, right? Because there's a lack of confidence. Think of the dissonance. I really want something, but I don't believe I can have it. That's not comfortable. And if I'm not going to get it, then I better not care, right? So, it's better to not care so you don't get as emotionally attached and as emotionally hurt, if you will. And so when we think about motivation, confidence, I think we really need to explore confidence as well. Because often I think it's a crisis of confidence, not a crisis of motivation. And confidence comes more through a credible plan. So we can talk about that in a second here. Okay. So for a second, we're going to just look at this idea of a client's motivation. So this is key to MI. So imagine a client says the following: I know I should follow up with a referral. So this is back to the scenario that we just introduced. It would help me figure out what to do, and I'd feel better about myself. So staying kind of generic here. Although I'm just too busy, plus maybe they would judge me and I hate feeling judged. So maybe you're referring someone to WIC or something where they could get, food stamps or something along those lines. But it might help me. So a client says that. So what do we do here? So I think some of the genius of motivational interviewing is that it's developed this idea of what they call change talk. I like to call it green talk. So the slide right now has green and red. So if you have vision issues or colorblind, this may not show up so well. Sorry about that. But think of like symbolically, green light, red light. So here, there's some green talk or some motivational speech, but there's also some quote unquote resistance speak or that red light talk, right? And so what MI is going to attempt to do in part is say, oh, how do I respond to this? So there's the change talk, and then there's that sustained talk or resistance talk. And MI has a lot of information on this. But what I want to really try to do is, again, if I'm trying to encourage motivation, then I want the client to be offering change talk, not me, right? If I offer change talk, that's called a fill in the blank, starts with the letter L, ends with the letter E. Anyone want to guess it? If I'm the one slinging change talk, telling the client the reasons for doing something, what's that called? Starts with an L, ends with an E, rhymes with lecture. It's a lecture. And people don't really like that, right? Like they don't want to be lectured to. And so my job, again, forgive the transition here. So what's my job from an MI point of view? I think it's this. Are you ready to see art and motivational interviewing? Oh boy. This is my job. If you're blown away by that, that's positive, I guess. Here's my job again. What's my job? Anyone guess it?
Connect the dots.
My job is to put out the dots. Client's job is to connect those dots. So from an MI perspective, I want to set up conversations so that it's the client who is offering or supplying that change talk, not me, right? And so we could talk about a lot of strategies for helping clients drop in this green talk so that they become more motivated, right? And so what I might do with this statement, there's something called a double-sided reflection. And basically it's kind of like Tevye, so Fiddler on the Roof, right? Like on the one hand, on the other hand. So I might say here like, hey, you're busy. And sometimes people do judge you. So that might be some reasons not to do it. And you mentioned that, getting on to some food assistance would really help you. Tell me more about that. So what I might do with this statement is honor the red talk, but try to set up the conversation to go green. Now, again, I'm not anti-red talk, and we've got to deal with some real barriers. But in the moment, I really want to further that change talk to hopefully tilt, the client towards being more motivated. By the way, this is going back to the question of like individuals have resources, but they're not following through with those. Or I might say, oh, you said it would help you. Tell me how it would help you emotionally. How would it help you psychologically? How would it help you practically? How would it help your child? And so I might, if I can hear, or if I can see or hear that green talk, and it's going to be peppered in with lots of red talk, right? Like that's just the nature of our worlds. There's both red and green talk together, and other types. But I want to try to structure the conversation so that they argue for healthy decisions, which is the green talk. Let me go over one more example, and then we can talk about this. I know calling the school helped my child and helped me feel more peace, but I just get overwhelmed and forget. The teachers are nice and supportive. I also have to work so much, it's so hard to find the time. So a client says something like that. Okay, here's your job. I don't know if we want to do a breakout or not. How many, by the way, we can vote on breakouts. Like you do a little smiley face. So one option we could break out and do this is to take this comment and then develop questions that would promote more green talk and red talk. So I'm actually going to live on the edge and suggest we do that. So let me go like this, first of all. So check out that statement, figure out where the red talk and green talk is. In 10 seconds, I'm going to show you where it is. Okay, so what do you say? All right, so there it is. Green talk, I know calling the school will help. My child and peace of mind. Someone's overwhelmed, they forget. Teachers are nice and supportive, and it's difficult because again, time is restricted. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to capture that. I don't know that I can share it when we're in our breakout sessions. I'm going to go to a breakout session, and we're going to have groups of about 4. And I want each of you to come up, if there's 4 or so, right? 2 questions that would promote green talk and 2 that would promote red talk. Now, the goal is not to promote red talk, but if you know what not to do, that's also helpful, right? So I'm what question would automatically bring up more red talk? Is that clear enough? Groups of 4. Each quad is supposed to come up with 2 ideas that would promote green talk and 2 ideas that would promote red talk from that example. So we're going to do a breakout, and this is going to be a short activity. Like you've got almost no time. So we're going to go like this. Options. I am at a room. So this has got a little bit confusing for me. I need to recreate. Okay. So there are, I think 48 of us, 4 into 48 goes like 12. Is that right? So recreate all rooms. This is gonna be quick, 2 minutes. So think fast, ready, set, go. Join that room and come up with some ideas. Okay, people are coming back in here. Get peeks of people at times. All right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, let's debrief this for a second. Since any reactions, ideas, to quote former President George Bush, George W., any learnings that we want to talk about?
Is that a reference to global
short.
warmings?
Anyway, too short, okay? So we allow more time next time, thank you. Anything else?
I was just wondering if that was a reference to global warmings.
Yes, yes. If you've seen the, yes, it is. There's a great Saturday Night Live skit on that, yes. Nice joke. Any other observations?
Level to Borat, cultural learnings. So not appropriate here, but in.
So any ideas on that red talk, green talk, how to promote more green talk versus red talk?
I am totally amazed at how easy it looks and sounds when you're talking about it, and how difficult it is to actually put together a question when you're facing the client.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, if these are new skills, that makes me happy, meaning, and it's challenging, Robin, perfect, right? Like that's the idea, is like growth comes from, kind of finding our edge and moving into that. So I think it is challenging. If you want, I can share another idea with you real quick about how to do that. So let me hold that and then see if there's any other comments or questions right now. So a lot of it we can reduce, might be a little bit edgy here. This is being recorded, this may not be good. If someone would not share this with my mother, I would appreciate it. So the big idea is with the F word. It's the F word. It's basically focus. Yikes, I hope that wasn't too inappropriate. It's what you focus on is kind of what you get, right? So if there's that green talk versus red, if you focus on, I don't, but if you focus on that, you'll probably get more of it. So if I were to say, for example, oh, you really get overwhelmed and you forget, what might your client say? Oh yeah, I've got a lot going on. Like, do you know what it's like to have a child with CP? Are you aware that it's really difficult? I work 2 jobs. And all of that's true in context. I want to honor that. And if all we do is focus on the red talk, just expect them to drop tons of red talk into the conversation. And then it's almost as if they're talking themselves out of the capacity to be successful there, right? And so that's where I like that double-sided reflection, where we talk a little bit about the red and then jump in on the green, seems to be helpful. And if we ignore the red, that's probably insensitive, right? Like that's probably dismissing a huge reality, right? That there are challenging, it is difficult to find time, and we want to try to promote that motivation. Any other thoughts or reactions to that?
I would just say that one thing we talked about in our little breakout group was that the line between the green and the red, the questions that will promote green and red aren't always clear to you, because you probably do need to get into these, what are the so many things you have going on, and that would actually be helpful. But if you don't get it quite right, you could just kind of lean into it, as you were saying. So
yeah, great comment. And so I think the thing to do about that is so kind of put a pin in it. So I might say, hey, I hear that there's a lot of, you're very overwhelmed, there's a lot to do. Let's talk about how we might overcome those. first, can we talk about your motivation to call the school? Can we explore why you want to do this for a minute? And then let's come back and try to work through some of the challenges that you have or the barriers that we may need to overcome. So I think that's what I would do is, certainly not ignore, if you will, the fact that there are barriers, because there's a bunch of them, especially like someone mentioned that a lot of our families are, there's a lot of challenges that they face. So anyway, I hope that helps, but I don't want to ignore those. And if we have, from an MI perspective, if there's a will, there is a fill in the blank. There's a way, right?
Hey.
If we don't have motivation, we probably won't move forward. If we were together, I might say, so from where I live, so I lived in Topeka, Kansas. Anyone from Topeka, Kansas on our call? So I lived there for a year after my PhD. I was doing a pre-doc internship there. Now, if I were to say to you back to the, like, hey, someone gets a $10,000 vacation, where would you go? Is anyone going to drop Topeka, Kansas onto the list? And maybe, but probably not. Now I might say, well, why and how? How do you get to Topeka? Well, for me, I turn left, so I can jump on, how many turn? I'll turn right onto I-80, left onto I-15, and then left onto I-70, and then right into Topeka. I am about 4 turns away from Topeka, Kansas. So that's right, left, right. That's easy. That is not difficult to do. But the big question is why? Why do you want to do this? And so MI is going to say, let's first kind of build that head of steam on the motivation, the green talk, and then drop into the red. Anyway, any other reactions or thoughts that people have on that topic?
Yeah, I think in our group was mentioned a little bit that fleshing out some of the barriers is a helpful way to problem solve. However, I feel like the initial barrier, but I'm just get overwhelmed and forget, very possibly may not really be the barrier at all. And you could go down a rabbit hole fleshing out what the real barrier is and completely forget the goal or what her motivation is or where we're going with the change and completely lose focus, because it could be she has social anxiety, could be she's just anxious or embarrassed or a million other things besides being really overwhelmed and forgetting. So that's trying to stay back in with the green is a good idea to stay focused, I think. Yeah,
and if I can kind of add to that, Tricia. So I love that. So let's say, okay, you really want to do, call the school because it'll help your child, your child's, and I'm talking to a parent here, maybe the parent didn't do so well in school, so they're really committed to having their child do well in school. And oh, why is that important for you? Because I didn't want to repeat what my parents did to me. I want my child to have a better opportunity because I love my child, because it's important. And you get all of this and say, this really is important. And there'll be some things that you'll need to do different to make that happen. You're going to have to overcome some barriers, such as social anxiety, such as, time management. And it sounds like it's really important. How about we figure this out together? But if you've got that motivation and it's all come out of that parent's mouth into their ear, they're like, yeah, I really want this. Then we can say, okay, you want it bad, and we're going to have to, we're going to have to lean into some difficult times here. Can we do that together? Wherever the boundaries are, right? And I think it just goes so much better. But if you jump into that red talk too early, that's probably what they tell themselves all the time anyway, right? Like all the yeah buts, all the I can't-itis, that stuff just slings out really easy. And it's like, all right, they're already defeated. Good point. Any other comments? So I think it was Robin who said it's kind of hard to generate ideas on, coming up, how do you pull out that green talk? So I'm going to share with you, I guess I can continue to do this. Hang tight. This is me fumbling. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen still. I think you can see me navigate. Oh, I don't know how to do this. Moment. Stop. What I don't want to do is end our meeting altogether. That would not be wise. So, fiddlesticks. I'm trying to get to another slide that will be, all right. Have I ended the meeting? No. We still here? Forgive me, I am gonna go like this, okay. So this is one way that I have found that helps with trying to evoke that green talk. And I'll just share it real quick. And I don't know if you can still see the screen or not. So one thing that I find to be pretty helpful.
We're not seeing your screen.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen back here and share screen. Okay, now can you see the screen?
Yes.
So imagine 5 dimensions. So this is something in a different presentation I call the Change Talkinator, which is pretty awesome sounding. But if we're trying to pull out that green talk, think of 5 different dimensions: time, past, present, and future; amount, less of, more of; impact, helpful or harmful. Again, this is a little bit complicated, so I can somehow find a way to get this to you all. We can do this in a future training. And then the target: alcohol, depression, suicide, something along those lines. So if I'm going to set up a question, I might say something along these lines. In the past, when you drank less, how did that help you in terms of your health? Here's the deal. If I show this slide, it's audio recorded, so it'll start throwing in sound there. So, but if I add these dimensions, I can produce a lot of pretty interesting questions, right? So here's another example. In the future, if you study less, how will that harm you in terms of feeling prepared? So the target, this is calling the school, or maybe it's overcoming a challenge to call the school. So in the future, I'm going to go back to the slides. I know I'm bouncing people because this is not in the slide and I'm ad-libbing here. So let's imagine this parent has to do something difficult, like she has to face social anxiety. So I might say, in the future, if you lean into your anxiety, how do you think that will help you in terms of, feeling confident about, your parenting? Or in the past, when you have leaned into your anxiety and you've taken some things on, how did that help you in terms of, your health? Or you might say, let's imagine the future you don't. So that's less of right here, right? So let's imagine you don't actually go to the school. And I'm not trying to induce shame or guilt, right? But I'm going to ask the question. In the future, if you don't talk to the school, how do you think that will harm your child in terms of their preparation? Or in the future, if you decide to not, follow through with food stamps, how do you think that would be challenging for you in meeting your budget? So to Robin's point, and we're not going to get to all of this, I think, but if you just think about these 5 different dimensions: time, past, present, future; amount, do you do more of it or less of it? Is that helpful or harmful? And then then we're talking about outcomes and targets. So anyway, any reactions? Am I dropping that in too confusing of a way? Or what reactions do you have to that? I could go to a few examples.
Oh, I actually found that quite helpful. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe that just sits better in my head as a formula, but
yeah,
those are things I think I could ask. If I had a cheat sheet, I sure could.
So this might, and hey, I know we're on Zoom, so this might feel a little bit clunky, but let me share an example. This comes from one of our trainings. You're going to hear me here. All right, let's put some sentences together here. So those are the 5 different dimensions. We're going to look at the target and an if-then proposition, and we're going to look at these 3 dimensions: past, possibly future, and then the outcome. All right, so here's the first one: addiction, right here, kind of following along in the first column. So if there's addiction, there's more of addiction, then it must be harmful, right? So let's put that together in a sentence. In the future, if you do more addiction, how will that harm you for the outcome in terms of your relationships? So that's how we're going to try to put the sentence together. Let's look at the next one. Addiction again. All right, now we're going to look at helpful. So what must be in that box with all the question marks? Well, it's going to be less. So let's put together a sentence here. In the past, when you did the addiction less, how did that help you? And we're going to drop down to the outcomes now in terms of your well-being or in terms of your spirituality. All right, the next one, anger. We know that we probably want less anger, right? So, this is more anger. So what's this next column going to be? Helpful or harmful? My guess is you can guess that's going to be harmful. So if we put together a sentence here, let's do this. So in the past, when you did more anger, how did that harm you in terms of your self-concept? So again, we're just trying to design sentences that would, utilize these 5 different aspects. And there's so many different dimensions that we can explore using these 5 dimensions. All right, we're back on anger, okay? And then it's less of, so if there's less anger, is this going to be helpful or harmful over here? Lost my voice there. Well, it's going to be helpful, you got it. So let's check it out here. So let's do future tense. And then, so we're gonna say, in the future, if you do your anger less, how will that help you in terms of what could the outcome be? In terms of, again, your self-concept, the quality of your relationships. All right, last box, being mindful. Does that sound like it's a positive thing? Indeed. All right. Helpful. So mindful and helpful, that makes sense. So will this be more of or less of? And the answer will be, you got it, more of. So let's construct a sentence there. Okay, so I don't know, I hope you heard that. Could you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's back to Robin's question, like, trying to pull out some of that green talk. I think looking at these 5 dimensions can be pretty helpful. The way I said it sounded pretty like more anger. You'd certainly want to, tailor that to the client situation. When you blow up more or when you've managed your patients better or not. So you don't have to be formulaic in how you say it, but I think that's one way to kind of help us move forward. Reactions, while I am trying to get back to our original slide show here. Any thoughts there?
I think it's really helpful.
Okay. Hey.
Yes, I agree.
So, and that's just something to practice. Like when folks said, hey, it's not easy to do, right, it's not. Or if it's new, it's not that's that hard. It's just, if you're not experienced with it, it might seem a little challenging. My guess here, by the way, if I go back, I'm bouncing around the slides a little bit, most of us want to spend our time, did not mean to do that. Most of us want to spend our time in this zone right here, Howland. We want to jump immediately to problem solving. So when I work or I supervise or I watch clinicians interact, we might do some small talk, get a sense of the goal, and we jump right to Howland. Motivational interviewing says, hey, if there's not a will, the way doesn't matter, right? Like you've got to lift that motivation, and those are some ways to do it. Okay. Any reactions, comments, questions before please stop me. Like I can just go. So any other reactions from folks at this point on the green talk, red talk stuff? So again, jump in if it's helpful. There's 3 things that MI suggests we do with green talk. So one is just seeing it. And for me, this was pretty revelatory. When I first learned this, I'm like, oh, check it out. There are different types of client language. In fact, so I'm skipping around here a bit, but there's all sorts of different kind of client language. There's goal talk, there's motivation talk. I guess I can just go like this. So, there's types of member language, client, member, whatever. There's goals, there's motivation, there's, steps that people can take, like action, like verbs, right? Things that people do. There's small talk. And then there's other stuff, like there's, stuff related to history, symptoms, patterns, etc. And what I like about motivational interviewing is it's a little bit like, the Rosetta Stone. is it comes and it kind of breaks it down like, oh, there's the person's goal. There's their motivation. There's a plan. They'll join AA or whatever. There's some small talk. And, then there's some, in this case, details about history. And if I'm trying to want to spend my time, what's this person saying and where should we be, right? Like if we don't have a clear goal and we're, just engaging in a lot of, if you will, small talk, that can be fun, but I don't know if it's that helpful. I mean, it builds relationships, right? But if I've only got 20 minutes with someone, I really want to maximize the utility of that 20 minutes. And so I might want to say, oh, let's move out of small talk into goals, motivation, how. Anyway, so that's any thoughts, comments, questions on that front before we go back to some other ideas here? If I hear silence, I probably get a little impatient. I'm sorry about that. I know we're jumping around here. This is for what's, MI is a lot. Like I teach a semester-long course on it, so we're jumping in, kind of talking about some of the the higher points, if you will. So change talk, that green talk, 3 things. I want to just hear it or see it. And then part of me wants to get greedy with it. Like, hey, it's one of the 7 deadly sins. We get a revel in that, right? So I want more of it, and I'll show you why in just a second. Basically, because more is linked to actual change. And then the other thing is just to cultivate it, like back to that, putting out dots and connecting those dots. Like part of me wants to really think about, like, how do I encourage conversations that have change talk? And there's some methods to do that. we're not going to actually spend time on that today. We're going to focus on some other things. Big idea. Yeah.
Sorry, someone has a question for you.
Okay.
In the chat, would you use the red talk and change that into a goal, or is that counterproductive or something to focus on in the future?
Yeah, I love it. So if you go back to that, what we talked about, complaints into goals. So that red talk is a complaint. So the good news is we now know how to kind of respond to those, to say, oh, I hear that concern. I can get empathy for that concern. And then how do we flip it so that, we use that as something that needs to be addressed, right? So how those would combine is if someone says, yeah, I want to, immunize my child, but my spouse doesn't support it. They have beliefs about not immunizing or whatever. To say like, oh, I hear the concern, there's discord between spouses, some empathy for that. And then, flipping that to a goal would be like, well, so maybe what we need to do is talk with you and your spouse together about how you can come to the same agreement. Or this is where we might get pretty, well, there may be less liberty here, right? Because of legal issues. But like, and can we talk about how you make decisions in, a conflicted space when your partner and you disagree or something along those lines? So absolutely, I love that idea. So the big idea is like, yeah, we can blend the red talk and green talk pretty easily. And the red talk may become a goal to work on, whether it's balancing your life, budgeting your money, budgeting your time, or something like that. Hope that helps. So good insight, person who asked the question. Other comments before we move forward? Thank you for those. It begins to feel like I talk in a bubble at times, so I appreciate the feedback. Okay, so change talk. Research shows the following. The more green talk we hear in a consultation, so if someone's audio recording a session and you hear a bunch of green talk, it's linked to, positive outcomes. That's a pretty optimistic line there, meaning correlation line. It's not that strong, but there is an association, statistically significant. Like if clients are dropping more green talk, they're more likely to actually change outside of our consultation session. And if we know that, like, do more of that. The other day I was fishing and fly fishing, and they weren't hitting something. And so I experimented and I changed up my setup there. And they started hitting that a lot more. I'm like, oh, well, I'm gonna do more of that. And I was fishing with my daughter, so I put her on the same kind of setup. Like, if that's what's working, how do we put that in front of our the client, the fish's mouth all the time, right? Like if it's change talk is connected to actual change, part of what I want to figure out is, well, how do I set up conversations where there's more of that green talk that comes forward? Okay. I'm going to move on to another topic here. So we kind of looked at this idea of maybe the motivation is low. And so in the scenario, like parents could use a resource, but they're not following through. So one question is, well, are goals clearly established? If yes, where's the client's motivation? But then, and I drew out that idea of confidence as well. Like if confidence is low, how do we lift confidence? And so I want to jump into this next area for a bit here. So this is, if I say this is my model, I don't mean that from a point of arrogance. What I mean is it doesn't have empirical support. So this is conceptually how I kind of think about consultations and about confidence. So again, no empirical evidence, just kind of more conceptual. So one idea is that my hope is that with each time I sit down with a client or work with a client, my hope is that they walk away with a bit more hope, right? That at the end of my time with them, they have and that's an emotion, hope. The opposites of hope, not great, right? Despair, futility, hopelessness, like those aren't great places to visit or reside. We want, them to have a sense of okay, things can work out. If only because people are more likely to take action, right? Like if you feel hopeless, we kind of freeze. So where does hope come from? Confidence. Again, the opposite of confidence. What are some synonyms for the opposite of confidence? What are the antonyms of confidence? That's a more efficient way of saying that. The opposite of confidence: doubt, worry, fear, dread, anxiety. Like we don't move under those situations, right? Like that fight or flight response, like, or freeze. We tend to freeze when we don't experience confidence. And so I believe if we can lift people's confidence, then, things get a lot better. Where does confidence come from? So for me, it comes from developing a credible plan. Notice the adjective credible, not to get political. I know I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to anyway. Like sometimes you hear people talk about plans, but they just don't feel credible. Like that's not going to work, right? Like, is the plan actually credible? Because if it's not credible, then you tend not to act on it. You tend not to put it into play, right? And so developing a credible plan with somebody, and if they work that plan, they tend to enjoy success, and success rocks, right? Like success is awesome. What the client I mentioned before, when she started, like back to Newtonian physics here, an object in motion stays in motion, like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, not just in terms of, dollars and cents, but like if people start to enjoy success, then that builds on themselves, right? Like they have some momentum, and that really helps them move forward. Either way, like if people are spinning downward, rich get richer, poor get poorer, right? Like that's concerning. And so I think we lift confidence by helping people develop credible plans. If they work that plan, enjoy success, and hopefully they can savor and see that, hey, I did that. That's going to bump their confidence, and that's going to promote hope. Well, where do we get credible plans? Really understanding. So we might say assessment is an activity. The goal is to understand, and it's the fit between the client and their world. So if someone's low functioning, so intellectual functioning, right? So using heavily cognitive orientation, it's a poor fit. Like if someone doesn't process information so well, again, not a position of morality, they just don't process information so well, then I should probably change my model that works for them, like rather than trying to force my system upon them. So really trying to get a healthy fit between the client and their world. This kind of Darwinian thinking here, right? Like a green rabbit. Is a green rabbit good or bad? It's a green rabbit. Green rabbits in brown deserts don't do so well, right? Like it's just not a great fit. A green rabbit in the Arctic, white land doesn't work so well, but a green rabbit in, lush green grass, hey, that does fine, right? So we really want to try to understand, is our approach fitting, the unique strengths and challenges that the client has? Okay. I'll pause. Any thoughts, comments, questions, reactions to this idea of the HOPE model? So putting this in position again, this idea of like, if we've got clear goals, motivation seems to be there, where's our confidence? And then I'm going to kind of drop in and say, like, how do we lift people's confidence? Developing credible plans. Hopefully they'll work those and get into success. Okay, so I've positioned that. I'm going to move forward. I hope it's not death by PowerPoint, but it probably is. Okay, so how do we build credible plans? So MI actually doesn't have a clear plan on this. Like, MI has nothing to say about diabetes management, right? Or how do you deal with cystic fibrosis? Like, zero ideas about specific ways of managing, certain conditions. It says nothing about how do you change your, if you will, like cognitive therapy or case management or, helping people engage, follow through, like habit development. Zero. So MI says nothing about that. And so what it does, though, is it kind of borrows a little bit from some ideas from, if you will, solution-focused therapy. I don't know if it borrows them or not. I don't know where they came from. So let me back off that statement. Since this is going to be on YouTube, I'm not sure the origin story there. Anyway, so how do we build credible plans, right? So again, coming back here, like how do we do this stuff? How do we build credible plans? And we're going to focus on understanding for just a second. And how do we understand? We're going to talk about two skills. One is knowing where to focus. That's number two. And then elicit, provide, elicit. And I'm going to drop into this elicit, provide, elicit for just a second and give some examples, and then know that we're probably in that how land. So if we go back to that arc of counseling, we're in that yellow box of how do you help people develop? What are the plans? How land. Okay. Hey, that's easy. 2 steps, not so difficult. I would say elicit, provide, elicit, by the way, is a spine skill, or it's a foundational skill that I think I use it everywhere in assessment and engagement and motivation and planning. I use it everywhere. It's pretty straightforward. Elicit what the client thinks, knows, and feels. Use ORs here. I'm not going to hit that skill right now. But it's not just eliciting, it's eliciting its empathy and it's extending till the end. So this really should feel pretty conversational. So I know I've got these things and all these 1, 2, 3s, these kind of hard and fast list looking things, not meant to be listy. It's meant to be very conversational. So I'm going to elicit what the client thinks, offer empathy, sprinkle that in, and extend to the client kind of reaches the end of what they know or think. And then depending, like I have some expertise, right? So, or I have a role as a professional. Don't need to be shy about that. And so I'm going to seek to provide some of my expertise where appropriate, right? So I'm going to provide some ideas. Doing that with permission is pretty key, meaning otherwise it just becomes unsolicited, lecturing maybe. And then that last elicit is to come back around and say, does the idea that I had square with your needs? And we don't want to do you like my idea? Then it draws attention to me as opposed to the idea. So I want to kind of, if you will, factor myself out of the idea. And does this idea help you or not help you, as opposed to please take care of me and my self-esteem? Like, that's not the goal. So does that idea, would that work for you? Did that fit for you? Tell me what we might need to modify so that it could work, or just dump it, right? So let's go through an example here. So that last elicit goes to number 2. Okay, here the focus on the client's knowledge of sleep hygiene. So this could be for themselves or someone else, like their child, right? So we're gonna do elicit, provide, elicit, and I'm gonna go through this example. Client says, so what do you know about sleep hygiene? So I'm eliciting. Client says, well, I'm not supposed to use electronics, drink caffeine right before going to bed, and I should have a pattern, something like that. And then we're not done. Like, remember that elicit, it's empathy, it's extending till the end. Counselor says, excellent, you're right. It is better to slow down electronics, caffeine, and to find a bedtime routine. So there, some high fives, way to go. And again, remember the importance of reflecting, right? So if I just say, oh, those are good ideas, what else? So those are good ideas. Those ideas, that's a pronoun that references, the specific ideas around electronics, caffeine, and routine, right? If I can, be specific in my reflection, what else? Well, that's about it. Probably not drinking as much caffeine is my big thing, okay? So I want to continue this show here. So, okay, for you, caffeine may be the thing to change, that you need to change the most. So again, reflection of the client says so that that idea passes in front of their brain a couple of times. Yep, and finding the right routine. I'm a little sporadic. And so then again, reflecting through on this, right? And in that example, you see a little bit of empathy dropped in there as well. Change can be tough, and you said it was important for you. So imagining that we've done what land and why land, now we're into how land with elicit, provide, elicit. And then I might say, the client says, yeah, it really is important for me to get better sleep. And then now I'm into that provision with permission. So I might say, hey, right, you do want better sleep. And okay, so let me slow down here. In addition to your really good ideas, I have a few ideas that might help you better sleep. May I share those with you? And what do you think the client will say? So here's where I think resistance just drops out. If you've, figured out what the client thinks, done a lot of affirmations in there, reflected them, really, help them feel, if you were like, hey, I'm with you, I'm securing you, they're going to say yes most of the time. Like rarely do they say no at this stage if we've done all this prep work. And then I might say, the client says, yeah, I'm open to any ideas you might have. Okay, now here's another skill. I'm going a little bit fast, folks, so sorry about that. So this skill that's kind of embedded in this next statement is emphasizing autonomy, and I'm front loading it. So this, people's autonomy, like there's something called self-determination theory, which speaks a lot about why people either adopt or don't adopt, suggestions. Autonomy is pretty critical of that. And so if I just say, oh, here's what you need to do, versus, hey, I've got an idea, I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Now, it takes more time to do this, right? So if you're pressed for time, so a lot of times attorneys or physicians or PAs will say, I don't have time for this. And I know times can get pretty crunched, but you say, I'm gonna share an idea, and then I wanna hear what you think about that idea, to see if it fits. Then I think it lowers the client's resistance. They're less likely to, get into that tug of war dynamic. The client says, okay. And then you share the idea. For some people, if they cannot fall asleep, this is pretty long-winded, sorry, and they stay in their bed and they just worry. They worry about not falling asleep or stress about other things in life. When this happens, the actual bed becomes a place to worry, like Pavlov and the dog, classical conditioning. So one recommendation is use the bed for sleeping and not worrying or stressing. Like if you're going to worry and stress, get out of bed and do that somewhere else. And then you might give some other ideas. Write it down, get it out of your brain onto paper. There's lots of ideas here, right? So then I've just suggested an idea, and then coming back around and saying, hey, what are your thoughts about this idea? So that last elicit is to figure out, if it needs to be modified or if they could adopt it. Okay, and the client says, counsel, what are your thoughts about this idea? That makes sense. I tend to do that. I lay in bed and stress, and it happens almost automatically as soon as I lay down. So notice this is a nice conversation. I think I can do that as well. Where should I go though? So then we're done. Like this client is on board. Like, if I shouldn't watch TV in bed, or I shouldn't, and then I might give them some other ideas, whether it's, okay, just lean next to your bed and actually read a book there, or write your stress somewhere else other than bed. That's, you can continue that conversation. Okay. So that's that last elicit. Now, here are a few quick tips. Which do you like better? How does using the bed for bed and not as a place to worry fit with you? That's option A. Or do you like my idea? Does my idea using the bed for bed work for you? I think it should. Please like my idea. It is important that you like my idea. So if you're still listening, I hope you say 1 is the right answer, because it is. I don't know if it's the right answer, but I think it's the better answer. Notice number 2 begins to confound the idea, the advice, with my self-esteem. And that makes it like clients shouldn't have to take care of me, right? Like they should be just, does that idea fit for them or not? Okay. Another quick idea, don't rush through the steps. I think when I've tried to teach the skill before, maybe it's practice, context, or kind of truncated by definition. But, you know, I think we want to do that first elicit and then be done, and then provide. And, you know, so we get one little idea from the client and we just jump into problem solving, or that, you know, provide. I think it's a lot better to just spend some time in that initial elicit. Okay. So I am going to stop sharing the screen for a minute and just see where we are on time. Any reactions to elicit, provide, elicit, and then I'll talk more about this developing credible plans for a second. But I'm going to stop and take a sip of water and see if anyone has any thoughts or reactions to this idea. If not, I'll keep going.
I want to say that I really like that practice of asking for permission, because that's something that I typically never think about. And I think as someone, if you are being the one on the receiving end, it feels really empowering, because then it's like really asking, am I in with it or not?
Thank you. Other reactions?
This is George again with the asking for permission thing about the empowerment and stuff. I like that because I think it can be easy in our fields of practice to become fixers. Because essentially, in a way we are, but it's like you discuss saying, instead of saying, okay, all right, this is your problem, let's do this, and this, and this. It helps get them more involved in the situation, and it's not just asking permission, but it's letting them gain control of their lives instead of us gaining control of their lives.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Thank you.
And I'll just jump on George's comment. So the medical home model is to partner with families. So this just goes back to underscoring that we're not trying to fix it for them. We are trying to partner with them so that they can ultimately be the ones who fix it. And that really does, with the permission and the autonomy, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. Other ideas? So no, it's a lot, right? We're looking at a lot of skills here. If I can provide an idea with your permission, what I would suggest is, just write a few of these, kind of skills from MI down, and then try them out in your practice, or, your unsuspecting family members at home, see what they do with it. And then like, hey, wait a minute, you've learned a new skill, knock that off. But just try it out. And my guess is the first 3 or 4 times you might be like, damn that Brad, he said this would work and it'd be easy, and it's not. Okay, right. Like the first few times you practice something, it's probably going to feel a little bit clunky, and that's okay. Step back and say, all right, what do I need to adjust? How do I move forward? And just play with it. One of the reasons that one skill I have about not making, I used to, when I first learned elicit, provide, elicit, I used to come back and say, well, do you like my idea? And they're like, oh, Brad, you're doing fine. You're really trying your best. I'm like, why are they trying to take care of me? Like, what happened? And it's because I was blending myself into the the skill. And so I'm like, oh, I need to divorce, if you will, the idea from me, so that the client doesn't have to worry about that. And that only came from me just kind of paying attention to that elicit, provide, elicit, saying like, yeah, it got goofy, like they're trying to take care of me, and that's not the goal here. So my point is, as you practice some of these skills and you try them out, give it 5 or 6 times, and then really be intentional about it. Like, no, I'm gonna try to do more permission questions. I'm gonna try more empathy plus empowerment or whatever, and then modify it so that it fits your world. Thank you for listening. I should provide now. What do you think about that idea? But in the spirit of being a hypocrite, I'm not gonna do that because we're gonna go on to more training. I'm going to move forward unless someone else wants to say something. All right, we're moving forward here. And hey, as far as timing goes, let me go about another 7 minutes or so, and then we'll just open it up for questions. Or how much time do you want to leave for questions, Mindy or Chuck? What are your thoughts?
Chuck had to drop off for another meeting. I think 10 minutes sounds about right. Okay,
we'll do that. Okay, so, and I'm going to skip over this real quick. It's a pretty simple idea. So when I'm working, so we're back to this idea of helping people develop credible plans. And I'm going to talk about, I'll show you in a second. We're going to do two little crosses, if you will. So we can learn a lot from client successes, pure wins, near misses, getting back on track. So what's a pure win? So, someone's been sober for 30 days, like, hey, way to go, right? A near miss. I worked with a client who said he was, jonesing pretty hard, went into 7-Eleven and just sat there and looked at the alcohol for like a half an hour and then, left. So that was a near miss. That's a success. Like they didn't do it. They thought about it, but did not, right? Or getting back on track. So someone's, fallen off the wagon, so to speak, but now they're back on. So those could be considered client successes. Not to offend Brene Brown, but there's also, fails, if you will. There's client struggles, and I don't want to shame anyone. There's none of that, but we can learn a lot. So when a plane crashes, someone goes afterward and does this anatomy of the crash, like what happened, not to gloat or to kind of, revel in the failure, but to say, well, what happened so that we can learn what not to do, right? So imagine this, there's the client's past, their successes, near misses, they're back on track, or a quote unquote fell. And when I talk about fail, again, no shaming, like, hey, things didn't go well for you there. Like you had a fall down or whatever. Let's just learn from that. So then if I'm trying to learn, so I'm looking for verbs here, right? So I'm on the hunt for verbs. So what I might do here is, by the way, so I think this strategy is really helpful because I don't have to know a lot. That sounds like laziness. But just with this framework, I can get a lot of, understanding about how to develop a credible plan with the client with just this framework, whether it's about diabetes management, whether it's about relationship management, whether it's about, regulating my emotions, succeeding at work, helping my child be whatever, like it's content independent, or it's kind of, content free, if you will, or topic free. So what were you thinking? Who did you get support from? What were you not doing or avoiding? That seems like a double negative. That can be a little bit tricky. Or what were you doing? So let me go back here. So now then what I might do is say, okay, when you had success, like let's imagine you didn't get mad at your child. You're working with the parent in those terms. What were you telling yourself when you didn't get mad, if that's the goal? Did anyone help you when you didn't get mad, at your child? What did you avoid? So that one, what did I avoid? Well, I avoided telling myself that this child is deliberately trying to offend me. Or I avoided, staying up till 3 a.m. so that I had no patience in the morning. I avoided, or I avoided getting hangry or hungry. I ate, and so I wasn't, upset when I had success and not getting mad at my child. Or what were you doing? Oh, I committed to not get angry at my child, and I put a reminder bracelet on or something like that. Now, the same with it, let's take a fail. So let's imagine someone lost and they got really angry at their child. Then I might go back and say, okay, what were you thinking when you lost on your child? Well, I was thinking that my child was doing this intentionally, that my child doesn't love me. Okay, so those things then to avoid, right? Because it was linked to a quote unquote fail. Support, that one may not, like, what did you not, well, I didn't get support from my partner, or I felt all alone. That may or may not apply, so you could skip it. What were you not doing? Well, I wasn't practicing compassion. I wasn't practicing gratitude. I wasn't practicing good self-care. So if we're looking at that fail, and these become verbs or things you can do, right? So, and the idea is we want to convert all of the kind of responses here to that credible plan, things that people can do. Or what were you doing when you failed? I was watching, the Jerry Springer show, and that just got me all sorts of jacked up or something like that. So the idea is really doing an exploration and these 4 dimensions. You can add others about a client's success, near misses, back on track, and fail. So I think it's just a great little, if you will, mnemonic or structure to, explore what, how to find verbs. So this is nothing different. Pure success, those are the same 4 questions there. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this pretty quickly and get to this last idea. Near misses, same idea. Look, that person's about to step on a nail. That would hurt. You know, what did you do around a near miss? What do you do around getting back on track? This is not new. This is just, you know, a little bit more detail, I guess. Okay, same idea. Okay, here we go. Let me see here. Sometimes you see a client's priorities in facing, am I out of time? I've got 2 more minutes. Tell you what, I'm going to pull these up, and then if you're watching, this is being video recorded, so you could pause it and look at this. Oh, I added an extra D there. So, you know, if you see a mismatch, bring attention to the mismatch. That's what land activities, maybe clarifying goals and priorities, emphasizing clients' autonomy. It's really their decision. Interested to hear what they think and give you my opinion, and ultimately explore what they want to decide. Then, you know, get out of the middle. That's probably a good idea. So here's another idea. So let me just share this last skill. I'll just introduce it and then I'll move forward. Okay. Again, if you're watching this on video, you can pause it and check it out. So I think this idea of empathizing, normalizing, empathy alone won't be enough. So if a parent comes and says, hey, I'm really struggling with my child, and you're like, oh, that must be difficult. Like, yeah, they're a little monster. And you're like, yeah, it's difficult when children act out. You're like, yeah, it's really tough. You know, they never listen. You're like, oh, that must be upsetting. It really is upsetting. If that's all you do, you just, you know, I don't know how much you've helped. So then we want to talk about this idea of normalizing and, you know, what's typical so that they feel more relaxed, and then also empowering, which is, I'm not going to have time, folks. So I'm just going to break down here and then we'll stop and talk about it. So here's a, you know, this idea of empathy plus normalizing and empowering. You know, the child may be on the spectrum. You know, the empathy, thinking your child on the spectrum is frightening and daunting. Here's, you know, that's the empathy when children are struggling parent. We parents worry. So there's that normalizing. So we're offering some empathy and saying it's typical. This is not unusual for what's going on. I don't know what to do. There's some empathy in that black text. You know, not knowing can drive up our anxiety, which adds to confusion. And then the white is normalizing. And then the last one, if we're going to empower it, it's kind of like flipping a concern to a goal, that you're doing some empathy, and then how about we work together to, you know, to find ways to overcome depression. I don't know what to do. Can we work to find ways to figure out the next steps? Okay. So that's, this is being video recorded. So if you want to go back and look at those ideas, you can. That's handy about the video recording. I'm going to stop sharing, and we've got 10 minutes or so to talk about how do you want to talk about what ideas fit, what don't fit in your area of practice. How might you try to implement some of these ideas? So if you have a question, you can ask it and I'll try to respond. Yeah, I'll go to the chat. Any reactions, thoughts, comments, questions about how we might apply some of these ideas in your practice so that it moves to, like that fishing story, like getting that fly right in front of the client more often. Okay, crickets there. There we go. Okay, well, if no one has any ideas per se, if I can, providing a few ideas. So in intentional practice, you know, we jumped into a bunch of skills today. I think taking 1 or 2 and just trying them out can be helpful, right? Like that might, and then just, you know, back to like seeing what the skill is and trying to find a way to apply it. If this is I don't mean to be too self-promotional, but I'm going to anyway. So we've developed a training. So a lot of these videos and slides, and we have other examples, can be found at ecmpro.com. That is something people purchase, like for online, you know, MI training online. I'm pretty sure I've got some business partners, so I can't make this decision on my own. But if you were to say, hey, Brad, I watched this training and I want to go and learn more for our clinic, we'll get you a massive discount somehow. So somehow send me an email and we'll figure it out. Sorry if that's too self-promotional, but we've got like 16 hours of this kind of MI training with the videos and then actual video labs where we do examples with like role play things. Other comments? I know it's been a long training day for you all. I think it's easier to talk than it is to sit and listen at a time. So other reactions?
There's a question. It looks like the question is, are you paneled with select help in your clinical practice?
Yeah, so yes, I am, and my agency is, like, I have a medical provider. So we are, I'm in that, I don't take on a lot of new clients personally at this point, pretty full. I've got lots of great clinicians that do. So we're welcome for them to Compass Counseling Consulting. Man, this feels terrible. I'm doing self-promotional things.
No, that's okay. I mean, we'll put all this information in the meeting summary that we send out as well. I do want to mention that we had initially asked Dr. Lundahl if, this went well and people had desire for more training, if that might be something we could negotiate with him. So if it's all right, we will go ahead and follow up with this group and kind of get their responses to, would you like more? And then we can figure out. I don't think we'll be able to use our Wednesday morning UCCCN meeting time for this. It would need to be arranged for a different time that works for most, but we can certainly do that, and we will do that as well.
Oh, great.
So we have one more comment. This is all very helpful. Thank you. Another, this was a great use of time, very helpful. There was the question earlier, would we be able to get just a copy of the slides in addition to the recording? I don't know how you feel about that.
So the problem with my slides is that there's a lot of movement and things are overlaid a lot. So that is a little challenging to do. If there's a couple of skills that we went over, we've got these kind of worksheets that I can send a few of them over so that it's kind of a one-pager that, yeah, so I can do that. So if there's a few skills that people want, I can advance those. That'll kind of, like, for example, flipping skills. Here are the 6 steps. Here are a few examples. So I can certainly send that to you, Mindy, and you can forward it to the group.
That would be great. All right, yeah. Other people are underscoring that in the chat. Yeah, lots of really nice things coming through in the chat. Great. All right. Well, I have to say that time went really fast. I think it did for all of us. So we really enjoyed the breakouts. So just a little feedback for you in the future, this group at least, I think we all really enjoyed that. It's a nice thing that Zoom allows.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I thank you for your comments and participation. I hope some of these ideas are helpful. Back to, it's very important work we do. I think back to Dr. Takani, I mentioned this, my hero, when he said, this is your little child, I'll do whatever I can for her, to my brother-in-law. I think we're all in the good fortune. I don't know exactly what everyone on this call does, but what a privileged position to be in, right? Like, that we're helping people try to enjoy more success, more comfort, more peace in their life somehow. And I think a lot of times when sometimes when we lack skill, we get super anxious, right? Like I know I do. When I don't know, I freeze. What I love about MI is that it advances a lot of these very specific skills. And if you can own those, then you can forget about yourself and you can really pay attention to the person in front of you, which I think is a wonderful gift to both parties. So that's one of the things that I love about MI is it does seem deceptively simple and practicing it is challenging, but I think with some time and effort, it's pretty accessible. So anyway, thank you for your time and comments. Hope some of these ideas are helpful, and best wishes in all that you do. So
thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Brief at some point, let me know and we can talk it through.
Okay. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.